Chapter 724. As the capital city of northern Yanjing City definitely had a lot of restaurants that were presentable. Chu Xiu didn't know much about these things, but Xiang Wu did. After all, to him, eating was one of his few hobbies. At this moment, in the #1 private room of Flying Phoenix restaurant, Xiang Wu sat in the middle while Chu Xiu and Ran Qianli sat on either side of him. The atmosphere was a little awkward. Ran Qianli frowned and Chu Xiu wouldn't apologize humbly, so it was more like a meeting between enemies. Xiang Wu laughed and said, "I say, both of you, eat when you should. This restaurant's specialty is fried bananas. It was created by their chef under my inspiration. It became popular in Yanjing City in a short period of time." Chu Xiu glanced at the black thing on the plate. It was really affecting his appetite. If the chef of Flying Phoenix restaurant could only create this thing, he would have been chased away by the shopkeeper. It was more likely that this thing was created under Ran Qianli's coercion. Chu Xiu knocked on the table with his fingers and said, "General Ran, you and I do have some grudges in the northern fluttering snow city, that's true. But grudges don't affect interests. This time, I'm here to discuss a deal with you. After all, no one will go against interests." When Ran Qianli heard this, he turned around and asked in astonishment, "Deal? What deal?" He guessed that Chu Xiu wouldn't admit defeat so easily, but he didn't expect Chu Xiu to talk about a deal with him. Chu Xiu coughed and said, "I heard that your lineage accidentally discovered a part of the yin and yang sorrowful poem. You also know that I have several kinds of sorrowful poems on me, so I want to collect them all. For this, I am willing to take out the same level of martial arts in exchange and add some elixirs and other things produced by the Zhenwu Hall." After hearing Chu Xiu's words, Ran Qianli's eyes immediately flashed with astonishment. Many people in the pugilistic world knew about the Great Compassion poem. However, although a single Great Compassion poem was very strong, it was not strong enough to surpass the 9 transformations. Therefore, for so many years in the Jianghu, there were many martial artists who wanted to collect the Great Compassion poem. He did not expect Chu Xiu to have such ambition. However, be it Xiang Wu or Ran Qianli, neither of them believed that Chu Xiu would be able to gather all of the yin and yang sorrowful poems. After all, it had been so many years and no one in Jianghu had been able to do it. According to legend, some people could gather up to 6 of the sorrowful poems, but there was still one that they could not find. As far as they knew, although Chu Xiu had a lot of martial arts of the Great Compassion poem of heaven and earth intersecting yin and yang, he still needed a few more to complete it. He was still far from completion. In fact, this was also something that Chu Xiu had unintentionally hidden. His great primordial chaos technique of heaven and earth and the great acupoint shifting technique of heaven and earth were internal martial arts. Even if Chu Xiu displayed them in public, very few people would be able to see through them. No one expected that Chu Xiu had actually collected the last part of the Great Compassion poem without making a sound. Previously in the conflict in the northern fluttering snow city, both parties did not really fight, so this conflict could be resolved. Ran Qianli immediately said, "You said that you are willing to exchange martial arts of equal value? All right, I don't want anything else. I heard that you have the secret 9 words formula of the Tantric Buddhism sect, as well as the divine martial arts passed down from Master Tam Yuan, the great sun-changing technique, and the colorless sealing palm. I just want these 3. The martial artists of Feng Jinwu's lineage did not practice pure Buddhist martial arts, but they were somewhat related to Buddhist martial arts. Therefore, among the martial artists of the northern Yan world, Feng Jinwu was closest to Buddhist martial arts. Everyone in the pugilistic world knew that Chu Xiu practiced martial arts, Taoism, Buddhism, and demonic martial arts. It was just that no monk had come to make a fuss about Chu Xiu handing over his Buddhist martial arts. Of course, this was not because those monks were reasonable, but because there was no need. The Buddhist sects in the world were led by the Zen sects, and they naturally looked down on the 9 words formula of the Tantric Buddhism sect. There was also the great sun-changing technique and the colorless sealing palm. Although these 2 martial arts were from the Zen sects, they were passed down from Master Tam Yuan. With Master Tam Yuan's reputation, even if everyone knew that he had found the wrong successor and had actually passed down his legacy to a devil like Chu Xiu, no one could use the excuse of martial arts sects to take away this legacy. The Buddhist martial arts that Chu Xiu practiced had been proven in countless battles, and its power could be said to be incomparably strong. If Feng Jinwu could inherit these 3 martial arts from Chu Xiu, the strength of the lineage of Feng Jinwu's lineage would definitely increase by leaps and bounds. At this moment, Chu Xiu sneered and said, General Ren, aren't you too optimistic? Don't you know the level of these 3 martial arts? I'm talking about exchanging them to the same level as the Great Compassion poem in your hands. Are you treating the martial arts in your hands as the complete version of the Great Compassion poem? Ran Qianli said faintly, Official Chu, you are wrong. Not a single one of the Great Compassion poems can be missing, and there is no difference between 6 and 5. Since you want to make a deal, you definitely have to use the value of the entire Great Compassion poem to evaluate it. Am I wrong to say so? Chu Xiu shook his head and said, I came here with sincerity, but it seems like General Ren is not sincere at all. Ren Qianli fiddled with the teacup in his hand and said faintly, Official Chu, I will also tell you the truth. The Great Compassion poem is not in my hands now, but in the hands of my master. Chen Jinting is my master's last disciple. Previously, you taught Chen Jinting a lesson in front of everyone. Even though you are of the same generation and age as Chen Jinting, your strength is sufficient to be his senior. Therefore, I didn't find trouble with you after that. However, Master, on the other hand, is very displeased with you. You should know that he is already old and doesn't care much about things like power and influence anymore. On the contrary, he values his reputation more than anyone else. If you were to teach your junior brother a lesson, you would be disgracing Master. If you could go to Empty Valley and kowtow to Master in front of everyone, admitting defeat and giving in to Master, then perhaps Master wouldn't even need to exchange anything for the Great Compassion poem. Master would just give it to you. But on the other hand, if you don't want to give Master face, then take out the few Buddhist techniques you have and I will go to Master myself. Whether it is persuasion or deception, I will definitely be able to get the techniques for you in the end. After he finished speaking, Ren Qianli leisurely drank a mouthful of wine with a fearless look on his face. In fact, he wasn't deliberately humiliating Chu Xiu. In fact, he hoped that Chu Xiu would choose the latter option. That way, he would be able to obtain a few powerful Buddhist techniques. After the incident at the Fluttering Snow City, Feng Jinwu was indeed unbearably angry. In terms of status in Jianghu, Feng Jinwu was definitely one of the oldest people in the northern Yan. He was of the same generation as the ancestor of the Fluttering Snow City. In addition, he was a rogue cultivator and didn't have any demonic identity. Therefore, the northern Yan martial arts community gave him face. Even the first seat of the Great Guangming Temple was the same. Of course, the first seat of the Great Guangming Temple referred to the 6 great martial academies and not the 3 great Zen halls. Just like what Ran Qianli said, the old man was already so old. He wasn't as greedy for life as the ancestor of the Fluttering Snow City. He didn't care about power, fame, and even further strength. The only thing he cared about was his own reputation. This time, Chu Xiu humiliated Chen Jinting in public. This matter wasn't big or small, but it really made Feng Jinwu very angry. And Feng Jinwu wasn't so old and muddle-headed as to find trouble with Chu Xiu over such a trivial matter. Therefore, he had originally planned to let it go. But now, if Chu Xiu took the initiative to come to him, it would be strange if Feng Jinwu didn't treat him nicely. Chu Xiu revealed a mysterious smile on his face. Although there was a smile on his face, there was a hint of coldness in his eyes. That is to say, there's no room for negotiation? A person's way of thinking would change according to their status, just like how Chu Xiu was now. If he was weak in the past, it wouldn't be a big deal for him to kowtow and apologize for a technique like the Great Compassion poem. Kneeling could be exchanged for a peerless technique. There were countless people in Jianghu who wanted to kneel. It was said that a man's knees were worth gold. There were countless people in Jianghu who dared to say this. But when it came to the crucial moment, one still had to kneel. Gold wasn't as important as one's life or future. But now, Chu Xiu wasn't the Chu Xiu of the past. In the younger generation of Jianghu, he and Zhang Qingzhen were outstanding people who far surpassed their peers. Along the way, there were countless martial arts masters who died in the hands of Chu Xiu. To put it in an arrogant way, he was also someone who could stir up a storm with one hand. Therefore, even though he knew that he could get what he wanted by kneeling, Chu Xiu didn't want to kneel. Seeing that the atmosphere between the two parties was getting tenser, Xiang Wu, who had been engrossed in eating bananas, raised his head and said to Ran Qianli, I say, old Ren, let's each take a step back. Change the conditions to something less harsh and give me some face. Ren Qianli stood up and said faintly, Marquis, I've already given you face. Otherwise, I wouldn't have appeared here today. However, I really couldn't change the conditions. Master was currently in a fit of anger. Without absolute benefits, I didn't dare to go to Master's place and say those useless things. Official Chu is stubborn and unwilling to give in. If he isn't willing to pay the price, then there's nothing I can do. With that, Ren Chenli turned and left. Anyway, now that Chu Xiao had something to ask of him, he had nothing to fear. Xiang Wu spread his hands at Chu Xiao and said, "You saw it. Don't blame me for not doing my best. It's just that my reputation isn't that useful." As the great general of the 5 armies, Xiang Wu didn't have a good relationship with the other great generals. After all, he was a member of the Northern Yan royal family, and there was a barrier between him and the others. He really wanted to help Chu Xiao to the best of his ability, but it was a pity that this matter was beyond his ability. Chapter 725. Xiang Wu's relationship with Chu Xiao was not bad, but it was limited to helping Chu Xiao to the best of his ability, just like now. Chu Xiao's status and the friendship between them were not good enough for Xiang Wu to help him with all his might. "I'll have to trouble Marquis this time. I'll settle this myself," Chu Xiao said in a low voice. Xiang Wu suddenly poked his head over and said in a low voice, "I say, are you really going to provoke Feng Jinwu's people? I advise you to calm down." Putting aside Feng Jinwu's strength, as the saying goes, one can be strong without desire. He is an old man who is about to be buried and does not stand on any side, so he is not willing to offend anyone. Even His Majesty is not willing to offend this kind of unaffiliated cultivator who has no power and is not an enemy of the imperial court, for fear that he will be forced to rebel. I can give you an idea, and that is to endure. Endure until Feng Jinwu dies of exhaustion. That old man does not have many days left to live, and it is impossible for him to advance in this lifetime. Therefore, with your lifespan, it will be easy for you to endure until he dies. When Feng Jinwu is dead, Ren Chenli probably won't be a match for you. As for Chen Jinting, he has great ambitions but little talent. His talent can only be considered decent and is far from being comparable to those on the Longhu list. When that time comes, you can simply snatch the Great Compassion poem in any way you want. There is no need to rush. In all fairness, what Xiang Long said was indeed a good idea. What was Chu Xiao's advantage? His youth. Therefore, if Chu Xiao wanted to endure, he could theoretically outlast all his enemies. However, 10,000 years was too long, and Chu Xiao would rather seize every moment. Relying on the power of time to kill an opponent was not his style. Standing up, Chu Xiao smiled and said, "To stand out in the Jianghu, it is not to snatch but to fight. This style does not suit me." After that, Chu Xiao turned around and left. Xiang Wu shrugged. Anyway, he had said what he needed to say. Next, he just needed to watch the show. Looking at the leftover dishes on his table, Xiang Wu shouted, "Manager, give me another plate of fried bananas." Back in the Zhenwu Hall, Chu Xiao immediately asked his men to secretly contact Bai Wuji. Among Chu Xiao's subordinates, there were some who came from the Yinma clan. Some of them were not only good at martial arts, but also knew all kinds of things. It should be easy for them to pass the message to Bai Wuji and avoid the eyes of Bai Han Tian and Bai Han Feng. A few days later, Bai Wuji was waiting for Chu Xiao in a private room of the Flying Phoenix Pavilion in Yanjin City. Of course, he was not willing to come, but Chu Xiao had something on him. If he did not come, he could not imagine what would happen to him. Pushing the door and entering, Chu Xiao said in surprise, "Oh, you did not hide your appearance and came here." Bai Wuji shook his head with a bitter smile and said, "There is nothing to hide. At the moment, the northern floating snow city is too busy to take care of itself. There are countless people coming to cause trouble. There is no one to care about us, the younger generation of martial artists. Going out will be a disaster." Chu Xiao sat in front of Bai Wuji and said, "All right, I'll cut to the chase. I'm only here to tell you one thing." "What is it?" At this time, Bai Wuji had completely given up struggling. Since he had decided to follow Chu Xiao, there was no need to resist in the dark. Otherwise, he would die more miserably. Chu Xiao did not directly say it, he just asked, "Last time, didn't you say that you have a good relationship with Chen Jinting? Now tell me, what kind of person is this Chen Jinting?" Bai Wuji thought for a moment and said, "Speaking of martial arts talent, this person is not too good, but he is not too bad either. At least, it is not easy to find someone like him among the rogue cultivators. Otherwise, Feng Jinwu would not have accepted him as a disciple. Aristocratic families relied on bloodline inheritance, and the elders were all strong, so most of their children's talent was not too bad. Sects, on the other hand, relied on their reputation to pass down their inheritance. The greater their reputation, the larger the territory they controlled, the more people they could influence and the more people who would take the initiative to come to learn from them. Therefore they could give them more leeway to choose. For a rogue cultivator like Feng Jinwu, although he was strong, it was not as convenient to accept disciples as a small sect. Therefore, in the case of limited resources, Feng Jinwu being able to accept a disciple with Chen Jinting's talent was already very good. Bai Wuji continued, excluding his talent, there is nothing much to say about this person. He is a scheming person, but in fact, he is brainless, simple and violent. He seems to be tolerant, but in fact, he is easily influenced by his own emotions. On the surface, he is humble, but in fact, he is arrogant, thinking that it is extraordinary to be accepted as a disciple by Feng Jinwu. This guy is not very likable. Usually we hang out with him, but for the sake of his master, we don't want to become enemies with him. But in the end, he just wants to get close to us. Chu Xiao nodded. If this was the case, then it would be much easier to deal with. Therefore, Chu Xiao waved his hand, whispered a few words to Bai Wuji, and then left. A few days later, in Yanjing City, Bai Wuji, Chen Jinting, and some young cultivators from the northern Yan land gathered in Flying Phoenix House to drink. This time, it was Bai Wuji's treat. At present, he was the strongest among the young people, and also had the most powerful background, so when he invited them, no one refused. Moreover, those who came had some sympathy for Bai Wuji. Someone patted Bai Wuji's shoulder and said, "Brother Bai, it's all in the past, don't let it go." After the matter of the northern floating snow city spread out, everyone knew the truth. What happened to the previous generations of floating snow city disciples, naturally, couldn't be hidden from them. If it wasn't for Chu Xiao intervening and revealing the truth, Bai Wuji would have become a cripple now. The other disciples were also from big sects, and for someone who had to sacrifice himself for the benefit of his family or sect, they all felt sympathetic, so they didn't take pleasure in Bai Wuji's misfortune. Instead, they comforted him. Bai Wuji smiled bitterly and shook his head. "Thank you for your kindness, but it's all in the past, there is no need to mention it again." After saying that, Bai Wuji began to change the topic. But as the conversation went on, the topic shifted to Chu Xiao and the imperial court, causing Chen Jinting's face to turn red. Half of it was because he drank too much, and the other half was because he was enraged. Right now, if we were to talk about the elites of the younger generation, then it would definitely be Zhang Qingzhen of Longhu Mountain and Chu Xiao of the Hidden Devil faction. Right now, there are even people in the pugilistic world who call the two of them the righteous celestial master, Devil Chu Xiao. Both the righteous and evil factions are unparalleled. It's also fortunate that our righteous faction has the little celestial master, or else we would be defeated by the devil faction. Hearing people praising Chu Xiao, Chen Jinting's face turned redder and redder, hiding his anger. Last time in the northern floating snow city, he was humiliated by Chu Xiao in such a manner. It was simply too humiliating. After returning to the empty valley, he wanted to ask his master to avenge him, but he was taught a lesson by his master again. Feng Jinwu was not a child. He would not fight over such a trivial matter. So from then on, Chen Jinting had been suppressing this anger in his heart. Hearing this, Chen Jinting could no longer hold it in. He snorted coldly and said, "Does Chu Xiao deserve to be compared to the little celestial master? Bah! Who is he? A traitor, a shameless villain. Who doesn't know what Chu Xiao has done all these years? In the past, Chu Xiao was born in the Blue Dragon Society, but he betrayed and joined the Guanzhong torture room. The iron-faced judge of the Guanzhong torture room, Master Guan, was very fond of him, but he secretly joined the Hidden Devil faction and plotted against the Guanzhong torture room. Now he has joined hands with the Imperial Court, established the Martial Suppression Hall, and is willing to be the Imperial Court's dog, stirring up trouble in the entire northern Yan martial world. Such a person is simply a slave to the four families, without the slightest sense of propriety or shame. Does such a person deserve to be compared to the little celestial master? Everyone present was stunned. This person really dared to say such a thing. With Chu Xiao's fierce reputation in the northern Yan martial world, although there were many who wanted to curse him, and even more who cursed him in secret, There were not many who would do this in public. Bai Wuji was also stunned. Although he had deliberately led Chen Jinting on, he did not expect Chen Jinting to be so ruthless. This was simply a huge offense against Chu Xiao. But Bai Wuji immediately reacted and said, "Brother Chen, you have drunk too much. This is Yanjin City, the territory of Chu Xiao and the imperial court. Don't talk nonsense." Chen Jinting sneered and said, "The imperial court's territory? Chu Xiao's territory? What a joke. The world belongs to the people of the world. Since when did it become the imperial court and Chu Xiao's?" If Chen Jinting's words were heard in other places, it would be a little bit pretentious and heroic. But at this time, it made people feel that he was going further and further down the road of death. At this moment, the door suddenly burst open, and a young martial artist walked in with a group of people. He said angrily, "How dare you? Chen Jinting, how dare you insult official Chu like this?" This young martial artist had the strength of the internal strength realm, and he was accompanied by some martial artists who were not strong. Seeing this young man, Chen Jinting sneered and said, "I was wondering who it was. So it's Shen Mingyang, a guy who is willing to be someone's dog. Your father betrayed his brother and became a dog for Chu Xiao in order to seek a future and power. Now you are also shameless to be a dog. It's simply a disgrace." This Shen Mingyang was the son of Shen Feiying from the Giant Spirit Gang. He was also acquainted with Chen Jinting and the others. At this time, it was unknown whether he had drunk too much or he really did not put Shen Mingyang in his eyes, but he scolded him ruthlessly. Shen Mingyang sneered and said, "I am a dog for official Chu. At least I have the confidence to live, unlike you. Last time, official Chu pointed at your nose and scolded you in the far north floating snow city. Did you dare to say half a word? Now you only dare to secretly slander official Chu here. Aren't you worse than a dog?" Chen Jinting was provoked and his anger surged. He directly cursed, his hand formed a fist seal, and directly punched at Shen Changming. The moment he attacked Bai Wuji, who was closest to him, could have stopped him, but he did not move. Instead, an undetectable smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Chapter 726. Chen Jinting's strength was much stronger than Shen Zhongming. Under his punch, Shen Zhongming tried his best to defend, but he still vomited blood and smashed the door behind him. Shen Zhongming gritted his teeth and stood up. Official Chu would compensate him 10 times or even 100 times in the future. Just as Chen Jinting was about to make a move, Tang Ye's figure suddenly appeared beside him. A golden dragon tail soul-chasing dart was gently pressed against Chen Jinting's neck. Chen Jinting's body suddenly stiffened, and he didn't dare to move. Tang Ye smiled and said, "You had a good time scolding him just now, right? You also had a good time, right? Okay. Now come with me to Zhenwu Hall. Don't you want to scold official Chu? Well, I will give you a chance to scold him as you please." Everyone present suddenly felt a chill in their hearts. Once he entered Zhenwu Hall, could he still come out? Some of them wanted to dissuade him, but when they saw Tang Ye's smiling but cold murderous gaze, everyone gave up the idea of speaking up for Chen Jinting. This idiot couldn't control his mouth, but they might be able to. Tang Ye said faintly, "Everyone has seen it. It was Chen Jinting who first insulted official Chu, and then he injured young Master Shen of the Giant Spirit Gang. Zhenwu Hall follows the rules, and official Chu is also reasonable. In this matter, we are in the right. No one can say a word of objection." After that, Tang Ye directly took Chen Jinting and left. The people present did not even dare to fart. Everyone looked at each other and turned to leave. Chen Jinting had a backer behind him, and Chu Xiao was also not an easy character to deal with. When these two people fought, they should leave as soon as possible to avoid accidental injury. At this time in Zhenwu Hall, Mei Qinglian looked at Chu Xiao sitting there with his eyes squinted, waiting leisurely. She couldn't help but ask, "I say, are you going to exchange Chen Jinting for the Great Compassion poem?" Chu Xiao opened his eyes and said faintly, "No matter what, he is also Feng Jinwu's last disciple. Isn't he worth a demonic skill? There are so many people watching this matter. It was Chen Jinting who acted first, and he is in the wrong. What reason do the monks of Great Guangming Temple have to come and complain?" In fact, if Chu Xiao wanted to catch Chen Jinting, as long as he lured him out, he could basically do whatever he wanted. It would be effortless. He had spent so much effort to scheme a small character like Chen Jinting. He just wanted to find a reasonable reason. Chen Jinting. Just like what Tanya had said before, Jinwu Hall followed the rules, and Chu Xiu was also reasonable. Right now, the rules and reason were all on his side, and no one could say anything wrong. If Feng Jinwu wanted the person, he could either forcefully attack, or he could only exchange the person with something. Moreover, Chu Xiu dared to guarantee that Feng Jinwu would not choose to forcefully attack. It was not that Feng Jinwu did not dare, but he was worried about the Northern Yan court. Although Zhanwu Hall belonged to Chu Xiu, it also belonged to the court. Zhanwu Hall was even built in the center of Yanjing City. If Feng Jinwu dared to make a move in Zhanwu Hall, it would not only be looking down on Chu Xiu, but also provoking the Northern Yan court. Mei Qinglian nodded and said, "If you just want to exchange for a demonic skill, then Feng Jinwu should agree. However, you know how difficult it is to deal with a powerhouse in the true fire spirit refinement state, especially Feng Jinwu's current state. You forced Feng Jinwu to take out the Great Compassion poem, but you have to be careful of his revenge in the future. After all, one can be strong without desire. Few people in Jianghu are willing to provoke a martial artist at Feng Jinwu's age and state." Feng Jinwu was not young anymore. If he wanted to go one step further in the true fire spirit refinement state, he would almost be a legend in Jianghu, a supreme martial artist. Therefore, at this stage, Feng Jinwu really did not care about anything. If he was really provoked, it was possible that he would do something that would result in a life-and-death struggle. A cold light flashed in Chu Xiu's eyes and said, "Can't provoke? If you can't provoke the living, can't you afford to provoke the dead?" Mei Qinglian was shocked, but before she could ask, Tanya had already brought Chen Jinting over. Back in the northern fluttering snow city, Chen Jinting was very confident because he had Ran Qianli by his side. He dared not to be convinced when facing Chu Xiu. But now, he was alone with Chu Xiu. Feeling the cold murderous intent around him and the mocking eyes of Tang Yao and the others, Chen Jinting's hands trembled. He forced himself to say, "Chu Xiu, what are you doing? You know who my master is. If something happens to me here, my master and my senior brother won't let you off." Chu Xiu walked forward step by step with a calm and indifferent look in his eyes. He looked at Chen Jinting as if he was looking at a piece of merchandise or an object. Hee. With two chuckles, Chu Xiu stretched out his hand and touched Chen Jinting's head. He did not use much strength. It was just an action of sizing him up, but it scared Chen Jinting so much that he broke down. "Don't kill me. I was wrong, Official Chu, I was really wrong. I was blinded by law to say those words. Please let me go this time. I will give you whatever you want." Looking at Chen Jinting, who had a face full of fear and tears, Mei Qinglian said in surprise, "Is this guy really Feng Jinwu's last disciple? Even if that old man is blind, he wouldn't accept a guy like this as his last disciple, right?" Chu Xiu said calmly, "Feng Jinwu is a rogue cultivator. It's normal. Not everyone is good at reading people. Moreover, this guy is not like this in front of Feng Jinwu. In his heart, his biggest backer is Feng Jinwu. Therefore, when he is in front of Feng Jinwu, he shows an extremely confident attitude. But in front of me, his backer is too far away. At this moment, he reveals his true nature and heart. This proves that the wind-sweeping tower's Longhu leaderboard is somewhat reliable. At least they didn't put such a person on the leaderboard. Among the wind-sweeping tower's Longhu leaderboard, the Longhu leaderboard was the most unreliable. Some people entered the leaderboard through favors. But in reality, excluding those who entered the leaderboard through favors, the rest of the leaderboard were very reliable. For example, the Longhu leaderboard did not only look at strength, but also ability. Even if you had the strength of the unity of heaven and man realm at the age of 18, you would not be able to enter the Longhu leaderboard if you didn't even fight once and did nothing big. On the contrary, if someone was famous in the Xiantian realm, the Longhu leaderboard would also accept you. With Chen Jinting's background, the wind-sweeping towers branch in the northern Yan land should have taken notice of him. But in the end, there was no sign of him on the Longhu leaderboard. At this moment, Pang Hu also walked over unsteadily. Seeing Chen Jinting's appearance, he could not help but sneer. Previously in the drifting snow city in the extreme north, wasn't this guy very strong-willed? Why is he afraid now? Haha, so he's also a spear that looks like it's made of wax. But this guy is actually worth the heaven and earth yin yang sorrowful poem. It's not easy. Chen Jinting immediately heaved a sigh of relief when he heard this. If Chu Xiu was only here for the great compassion poem, then he still had a chance to live. He was afraid that Chu Xiu wanted to kill him because of his insults. But before Chen Jinting could even let out a sigh of relief, Chu Xiu suddenly reached out and grabbed the top of Chen Jinting's head. In an instant, a strong spiritual force exploded and poured into Chen Jinting's mind. Mei Qinglian and Pang, who were shocked. Didn't Chu Xiu want to use this guy's life to exchange for the great compassion poem? What was he doing now? Was he preparing to kill someone? Don't underestimate him. His value is not only worth the great compassion poem, but also his master's life. As soon as he said that, an endless abyss gathered in Chu Xiu's eyes, pulling Chen Jinting's divine soul to the deepest part of his heart and into the endless darkness. Chu Xiu's spiritual force had always been strong. Although he did not cultivate spiritual force, he dared to say that even if a martial Dao master from the Xiahou clan stood in front of him, Chu Xiu would be able to use his secret spiritual force to fight against him. Previously, when Master Yuan Ji used the divine sacrifice jade to perform the 3 lives illuminating technique on Chu Xiu's spiritual force suddenly increased by a lot. This was also the last thing Chu Xiu discovered. Moreover, Chu Xiu also discovered that his understanding of spiritual force had increased to another level. It was as if he had suddenly understood many truths in a daze, which was very magical. Chu Xiu had also wondered if this had something to do with the phenomenon on his body and Dugu Wei Wei, but he could not come to a conclusion in the end. Now, Chu Xiu used his epiphany of spiritual force on Chen Jinting. Chu Xiu did not have a complete theory on the cultivation of spiritual force. He just used it wherever he cultivated. At that moment, Chu Xiu was not destroying Chen Jinting's spirit, but he was modifying it. He forcibly created a version of himself in Chen Jinting's spiritual force. He was his soul, his spirit, and a part of him that controlled him. This was not a cultivation method, but a method that Chu Xiu obtained after he had a breakthrough in his spiritual force. He had to be meticulous in order to use it. This was because this was something that Chu Xiu had comprehended in a daze. For the time being, it was considered an epiphany. In any case, it did not have a name. Chu Xiu just casually named it the soul control technique. The control of the soul control technique had to be meticulous. If the other party's spiritual force was too strong, or if they had a strong will, it would lead to a backlash, causing the soul control technique to fail. Of course, this backlash was not against Chu Xiu, but against the person who had been subjected to the soul control technique. The result was that the person's primordial spirit would be torn apart, and they would directly become a living dead. Chu Xiu used the soul control technique on Chen Jinting only because Chen Jinting was trash and had an extremely weak will. Therefore, Chu Xiu's soul control technique would basically not fail or have any side effects. After a while, when Chu Xiu removed his hand from Chen Jinting's head, there was no fear on Chen Jinting's face, only deep reverence. He knelt at Chu Xiu's feet and trembled. It was not fear, but extreme reverence. He respected Chu Xiu as a god. Chapter 727. The soul control technique didn't completely turn a person into a puppet, but it left an indelible mark at the bottom of a person's heart. On the other hand, that person still had normal thoughts. As long as Chu Xiu wasn't around, he would look the same as before. Chu Xiu threw a small bottle to Chen Jinting, and Chen Jinting immediately put it away respectfully. "What is this?" Mei Qinglian asked in astonishment. "Gutworm." This bottle of gutworm was the same one that Yan Tingting used to harm him at the Shenwu sect. The one that Chu Xiu swallowed could no longer be used. This bottle of gutworm was found on Yan Tingting when Tangya and the rest were cleaning up the corpses. Although the conditions to use this thing were extremely harsh, it would be very useful once it was used well. When Mei Qinglian saw this, she seemed to know what Chu Xiu was going to do. She couldn't help but be shocked. Chu Xiu's craziness was even greater than before he became a martial arts grandmaster. At this moment, someone outside reported that Ran Chenli had arrived. Chu Xiu smiled and asked Tangya and the rest to take Chen Jinting away before letting Ran Chenli in. Ran Chenli walked in angrily and shouted, "Chu Xiu! What do you mean by this? I didn't agree to trade the great compassion poem with you, so you kidnapped my junior. Are you going to fight to the death with me?" Ran Chenli had just rejected Chu Xiu a few days ago, And now Chen Jinting was in trouble. Even an idiot would know that there must be a relationship between them. Chu Xiao said indifferently, Ran Qianli, you have to be reasonable when you speak. Go out and find out what exactly did that junior brother of yours do to be captured by me. Not only did he humiliate me in public, he even injured the son of Shen Feiying from the giant spirit gang. Don't tell me you don't know about this? Looking at Ran Qianli, Chu Xiao revealed a trace of coldness on his face and said in a deep voice, Chen Jinting said that the giant spirit gang is now my dog. What he said is right, but when you beat a dog, you have to look at its master. This is Yanjing City, the Yanjing City where my Zhenwu Hall is located. However, he insulted me and beat my dog in my territory. Ran Qianli, does that junior brother of yours think that I have a good temper or that I'm blind and deaf? When Ran Qianli heard this, he immediately fell silent and no longer had his overbearing manner from before. With so many people watching, it was impossible for him not to know anything about it. To be honest, he was infuriated. Chen Jinting usually looked relatively calm. Why did he do such an impulsive thing this time? This was Yanjing City, yet he had said all this under Chu Xiao's eyes. If this wasn't courting death, then what was? In the past, Chen Jinting often came to Yanjing City. After all, there was his senior brother, who was the great general of the state's 5 armies, as his backer. However, the problem was that Ran Qianli didn't have the final say in this huge Yanjing city. At the thought of this, Ran Qianli couldn't help but soften his tone and said, Chu Xiao, I know you want the Great Compassion poem. This matter is also Chen Jinting's fault. Let him go, and I'll bring you the Great Compassion poem. Chu Xiao said faintly, hand over the money and I'll hand over the goods. If you want him back, give me the Great Compassion poem first. Ran Qianli gritted his teeth and said, the Great Compassion poem is in the hands of Master. Do you have to lure him out? Actually, Ran Qianli didn't want to tell Feng Jinwu about this matter. Feng Jinwu's temper wasn't that reasonable. Chen Jinting got into trouble in his territory. If Feng Jinwu knew about this matter, he would definitely say that Ran Qianli didn't take good care of his junior brother and so on. Chu Xiao sneered and said, when a disciple gets into trouble, shouldn't the master come and get him? Am I wrong to say that? Ran Qianli looked deeply at Chu Xiao and said, Chu Xiao, are you really going to blow this matter up? Can't you give me some face? Chu Xiao said faintly, I'm in the right in this matter. Why should I be afraid of blowing this matter up? As for face, General Ran, you didn't give me any face at Feifeng restaurant a few days ago. Good. Chu Xiao, you did well. Ran Qianli's face turned extremely gloomy. He flicked his sleeves, turned around, and left. However, Chu Xiao had a fearless look on his face. He wasn't afraid of Feng Jinwu coming. He was more afraid that Feng Jinwu wouldn't come. If Feng Jinwu didn't come, how could he continue acting? Ran Qianli walked out of the Zhenwu Hall with a black face. He was immediately seen by a group of people and caused an uproar. Yanjing City wasn't big, and the news of Chu Xiao capturing Chen Jinting couldn't be hidden. Chen Jinting was just a small character, but his master had a powerful background. Therefore, everyone was watching to see how Chu Xiao would handle this matter. Finally, Ran Qianli came. Everyone thought that Chu Xiao would definitely give Ran Qianli some face and release Chen Jinting after Ran Qianli paid a price. However, who would have thought that Ran Qianli wouldn't be able to get Chen Jinting back? Since Ran Qianli had failed, it was obvious who would step up next. Over the past few days, Chu Xiao's side did not stop either. Several waves of people came over because of this matter. The first to arrive was actually Xiang Wu. After entering the door, Chu Xiao didn't serve tea for Xiang Wu. Instead, he asked someone to bring him a plate of bananas. He knew that Xiang Wu liked bananas. Xiang Wu held a banana but didn't eat it. He looked at Chu Xiao with a strange look and said, Brother Chu, aren't you being too ruthless this time? It's just a sorrowful poem. Do you really want to fight to the death with Feng Jinwu's lineage? Chu Xiao said faintly, it's not that I want to fight to the death with him, but Chen Jinting has gone too far. He dared to insult me in Yanjing City and even beat my people. What does this mean? Xiang Wu nodded. To be honest, if he encountered such a thing, he wouldn't be able to tolerate it either. Although Xiang Wu usually didn't look dignified and even a little unruly, in fact, only the West Hill Army had seen this general's angry look. That was truly terrifying. Marquis, you didn't specially come here to plead on Chen Jinting's behalf, right? Chu Xiu asked. Xiang Wu waved his hand and said, I have nothing better to do than to plead on his behalf. My boss asked me to come. Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes. He knew who Xiang Wu was talking about. There was only one person that Xiang Wu could call his boss, and that was the #1 person in the Northern Yan Army, the general of the Eastern Mountain Army, and an expert in the true fire spirit refinement state, Kwang Tu Beigong Bailey. This person had a great reputation in the Northern Yan Army, but in the eyes of Eastern Qi and the West Chu Imperial Court, this person was as terrifying as a demon. Beigong Bailey was called Kwang Tu, not Kwang Tu. This nickname came from the fact that when Beigong Bailey was leading the army, he was bloodthirsty. He never took any captives, and once he was defeated, he would kill them all. Therefore, when fighting against Beigong Bailey, the enemy would immediately flee if they were at a disadvantage. Because once they lost, only death awaited them. This person's murderous nature was not ordinary, to the extent that even Xiang Long couldn't handle it. Therefore, after the war between the Northern Yan Army and Eastern Qi ended, although Beigong Bailey was still leading the army, he rarely left Yanjing City. Unless there was a big move, the Northern Yan Imperial Court wouldn't release such a killing machine, and only let him guard Yanjing City. What orders does General Beigong have? Xiang Wu took a bite of the banana and said, Boss doesn't like to meddle in other people's business, but his current mission is to guard Yanjing City, and the Zhenwu Hall is also in Yanjing City. You've seen the horror of the true fire spirit refinement state, so boss only hopes that you don't fight in Yanjing City. Otherwise, if things get out of hand, he will have to intervene. Chu Xiu nodded and said, If that's the case, then don't worry, General Beigong. I'm not arrogant enough to fight with an expert of the true fire spirit refinement state. Of course, the premise is that Feng Jinwu doesn't force us. Xiang Wu nodded and said, It's no big deal. Boss just asked me to inform you, as long as you're confident. After saying that, Xiang Wu suddenly looked at the bananas on his table and said, I say, you don't like eating this thing, so I'll take it all away. Don't waste it. Chu Xiu held his head and waved his hand, indicating that Xiang Wu could do as he pleased. Those who could reach a high position were usually very persistent and unwavering. And Xiang Wu's obsession was eating bananas? After Xiang Wu left, another person came to Chu Xiu's side. It was a eunuch from the imperial palace. The old eunuch wore a green robe and his hair was neatly combed. He always had a formal smile on his face. At first glance, he looked like a fake person, but it actually gave people a chilling feeling. I'm Zhang Gu. I work in the imperial palace, in charge of the bastards who serve His Majesty. Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows and said, So it's Director Zhang from the imperial palace. My apologies for not recognizing you. The old eunuch in front of him might sound polite, but he was actually a martial arts master. He was also the director of the imperial palace, in charge of all the eunuchs in the imperial palace. However, Chu Xiu had heard that there seemed to be a powerful eunuch in the imperial palace who might have reached the true fire spirit refinement state. He had served several generations of Northern Yan emperors. Although he didn't care about other matters, he was the most senior. The expression on Zhang Ji's face did not change. He said, I'm here on His Majesty's order. His Majesty would like to ask official Chu, is the grudge between you and Feng Jinwu really irresolvable? Chu Xiu said lightly, It's not a grudge between me and him. He just wants to make things difficult for me. Chen Jinting insulted me as the imperial court's dog. I'm already the imperial court's dog. Where does he think the imperial court is? This is also an insult to the imperial court. I can't tolerate it. Zhang Gu nodded his head and said, Since that's the case, then as long as Darren Chu grasps propriety, everything will be fine. After all, Feng Jinwu is an expert at the true fire spirit refinement realm, and this is still Yanjing City. His Majesty doesn't want to make this matter bigger and cause more trouble. After saying that, Zhang Gu left. Chapter 728. In today's world, when Yi Xiaonan and the other experts on the legendary list stood at the pinnacle of Jianghu and didn't make a move easily, those at the true fire spirit refinement state were already considered experts among experts. The destructive power of a true fire spirit refinement state expert was enormous, especially for someone like Feng Jinwu who had no standpoint. It was precisely because Feng Jinwu had no standpoint that he didn't want to provoke anyone. He was just a rogue cultivator who had no enmity with diabolism and was on good terms with the orthodox martial arts world. Instead, he expressed goodwill in order to get the other party to stand on his side. Therefore, when Chu Xiu was about to go against Feng Jinwu, those who knew about this matter didn't think that Chu Xiu would win and felt that it was unwise for him to do so. However, it was a pity that Chu Xiu still did so, and it was true that Chen Jinting couldn't control his mouth, so no one could say anything. Xiang Long and Beigong Bailey only sent someone over to tell Chu Xiu to be careful and not go overboard. After all, Chu Xiu was on the same side as the imperial court. It was fine if they didn't help, but it would be too much to forcefully undermine him. More than 10 days later, Ren Qianli was waiting at the gate of Yanjing City in a golden robe instead of armor. He was waiting for Feng Jinwu. In armor, Ren Qianli was the general of the Northern Guard Army. Without armor, he was Feng Jinwu's disciple. Ren Qianli was very clear about his identity. An hour later, 3 people walked over from outside the city. Each of them seemed to have shrunk the ground to an inch, and they were extremely fast. They appeared in front of Ren Qianli almost in the blink of an eye. The one in the middle was a serious-looking old man wearing a brocade robe with cloud patterns. His white hair was neatly combed, and he looked like an extremely rigid and serious person. He didn't have any aura on him, but Ren Qianli unconsciously bowed in front of him. Even though he had become the general of the Northern Yan, he still couldn't forget how strict Feng Jinwu was when he was learning martial arts from him. On Feng Jinwu's left was a middle-aged martial Dao master. He was Huangfu Wei Ming from the Huangfu clan. He was not here to help Feng Jinwu deal with Chu Xiu. Instead, he was here to persuade Chu Xiu. This could also be considered as giving Chu Xiu some pressure so that he would let them go. There were only so many old people in the Northern Yan lands. The old ancestor of the Drifts Now city had lied to them for so many years, but in truth, he was already dead. The others who were on good terms with Feng Jinwu were Yan Shi and the Huangfu clan's ancestor. Therefore, Ancestor Huangfu sent Huangfu Wei Ming to make his stance clear after hearing about this matter. A martial Dao master was more than enough. Feng Jinwu's favor was not enough for Patriarch Huangfu to do it himself. The person next to Feng Jinwu was an old monk with wrinkles all over his face. He wore a slightly worn-out robe. Although he also had the strength of a martial Dao master, his aura had begun to weaken, and one could clearly feel that he was old. This person was Feng Jinwu's good friend, Jing Yuan, the old monk from the Bodhi Yard of the Great Light Temple. He was an expert from the previous generation of the Bodhi Yard. Jing Yuan and Feng Jinwu were actually of the same generation, and he was even younger than Feng Jinwu. However, he was not at the true fire spirit refinement realm, so he looked extremely old, much older than Feng Jinwu. In the Great Light Temple, almost all martial artists who were nearing the end of their lifespans would choose to go into closed-door cultivation. They would only do 2 things every day. One was to teach some new disciples martial arts, and the other was to recite Buddhist scriptures, compile, and train some martial arts. In such a quiet and peaceful atmosphere, the martial Dao masters of the Great Light Temple would usually die of old age. They lived much longer than the martial Dao masters of other sections. Take Jing Yuan for example. His lifespan was close to 300 years old. Although in theory, martial Dao masters could live up to 300 years old, most of them had a relapse of old injuries or internal injuries left behind during cultivation, so they lived far less than this number. However, almost half of the martial Dao masters of the Great Light Temple could live to the end of their lifespans. Jing Yuan had not taken a step out of the Great Light Temple for more than 10 years, but since his old friend wanted to invite him this time, Jing Yuan was willing to make an exception for him. However, Jing Yuan did not use his identity as a member of the Great Light Temple to threaten Chu Xiu. He only wanted to be a mediator in the middle to calm both parties down. He knew that Feng Jinwu had a bad temper, and he had also heard that Chu Xiu could be ruthless. Therefore, he only wanted to persuade the other party and try his best to prevent Chu Xiu from killing anyone. He did not want his old friend to die before him at a time like this. Greetings, Master. Senior Jing Yuan. Brother Huangfu, I didn't expect you to come too. Ren Qianli greeted Feng Jinwu respectfully, but before he could say anything, Feng Jinwu snorted, "Trash. You're getting worse and worse as a general. Didn't you tell me before how much power you have in the Northern Yan military? In the end, you can't even protect your junior brother. What's the point of being a general? Ren Chenli's face turned red. He knew that this master of his was never reasonable. However, Ren Qianli could only explain carefully. Master, it's not that I didn't want to save my junior, but I couldn't save him at that time. Chu Xiu's Zhenwu Hall has him, Qilian Village's red-faced heavenly king Pang Hu, and the shadow demon sect saintess, Mei Qinglian. There are 3 martial Dao masters there, and I couldn't snatch him away. Moreover, the Zhenwu Hall was established by Her Majesty, and its status is not lower than the 5 armies. I couldn't order Chu Xiu either. If things got out of hand, the Northern Yan Imperial Court would kill each other, and Her Majesty wouldn't like it. Feng Jinwu snorted again. You have so many misgivings. Why don't you follow me back to the empty valley to practice martial arts in seclusion? Ren Qianli didn't dare to say a word after being rebuked by Feng Jinwu, and he felt even more sullen. Chen Jinting was the one who couldn't control his mouth, so why was Master scolding him? Furthermore, it was impossible for Ren Qianli to return to the empty valley. A man was born to seek fame and fortune. In the Northern Yan Imperial Court, he was the revered general who commanded the Northern Guard Army. He was majestic and insufferably arrogant. Although returning to the empty valley would give him more time to avoid those intrigues and concentrate on martial arts, Ren Qianli was no longer willing to live that kind of life of hardship. Jing Yuan, who was beside him, advised, Brother Feng, things have already happened. It's useless to reprimand General Ren. Hurry to the Zhenwu Hall and bring him back, lest something goes wrong. Hearing Jing Yuan's words, Feng Jinwu snorted coldly and said, Bring me to the Zhenwu Hall. Ren Qianli heaved a sigh of relief and immediately led Feng Jinwu and the others to the Zhenwu Hall. During this period of time, the matter between Chu Xiu and Feng Jinwu's lineage had caused an uproar. Even if the people in Yanjing City didn't know Feng Jinwu, who else could make a dignified Northern Guard Army's Ren Qianli personally lead the way except for Feng Jinwu? The group of people immediately became spirited and followed behind them to the Zhenwu Hall. At this time, Chu Xiu, who was in the Zhenwu Hall, had also received the news and had been waiting there for a long time. In less than a quarter of an hour, a powerful pressure came from the outside world. The sky was suddenly covered with dark clouds, and there was even a faint roar of thunder. It was incomparably terrifying. Feng Jinwu stood outside the Zhenwu Hall with a gloomy face, just like the gloomy sky. The surrounding warriors who had never seen a true fire spirit refinement realm powerhouse were amazed. The power of a thought could affect the climate of a region. This kind of power was simply magical. Looking at the closed door of the Zhenwu Hall, Feng Jinwu's face showed a trace of anger. He was sure that Chu Xiu knew that he was coming, but he didn't even open the door. This kind of indifferent attitude made Feng Jinwu very angry. He took a step forward, and invisible waves spread forward, heading straight for the door of the Zhenwu Hall. Seeing that the door of the Zhenwu Hall was about to be smashed, the door was suddenly opened. A saber light with a soaring demonic aura suddenly fell and completely blocked the wave of waves. Chu Xiu stepped out of the door and sneered, Senior Feng is so angry. Do you knock on the door like this when you are a guest? Feng Jinwu said coldly, Guest? I'm not a nuisance to be a guest. Chu Xiu, you captured my disciple and forced I to come here in person. Do you really think that I's temper is so good? Chu Xiu said coldly, Senior Feng, I call you senior because of your age and seniority, but don't go too far. Don't tell me you don't know what your disciple has done? Not only did he humiliate me in public in Yanjing City, but he also injured my men. Do you still care about the law or the rules? Feng Jinwu's face was cold. If my disciple has done something wrong, I will be the one to teach him a lesson. You, a junior, actually want me to come personally to ask for him. You're really bold. Let Wei Shuya come. Feng Jinwu was actually not angry that Chu Xiu had captured Chen Jinting, but that he was bold enough to ask him to come personally to ask for him. As a martial artist of the older generation, Feng Jinwu's character was actually very rigid. In his opinion, even if Chu Xiu was famous in the underworld, so what? He was still a fledgling junior. In the Yinma clan, only someone like Wei Shuya was qualified to be mentioned in the same breath as him. Not to mention Chu Xiu, he didn't even care about Beigong Bailey, the #1 person in the Northern Yan military. The reason was simple. Although Beigong Bailey was strong, he was not old. At least, he was a junior when compared to Feng Jinwu. This kind of martial artist who thought that he could look down on everyone because of his seniority was not uncommon in the underworld. After being flattered for a long time, he really thought that everyone had to give him face. Now that Chu Xiu didn't want to give him face, he was naturally angry. Chu Xiu smiled coldly. I'm bold? It seems that Senior Feng still doesn't understand me. I'm here today to ask you to get him, not to quarrel. Since you don't want to get your disciple, fine, I'll kill him now and let him wait for you down there. Chapter 729. Chu Xiu was very daring, and he acted crazily without any scruples. This was something that many people knew. However, everyone was shocked to see Chu Xiu go head-to-head with Feng Jinwu, a veteran true fire refinement realm expert. They thought to themselves that Chu Xiu was indeed very bold. Feng Jinwu was enraged by Chu Xiu. He pointed at Chu Xiu and shouted angrily, "How dare you? Let's see if I dare or not." Chu Xiu also gave tit for tat, not giving in at all. At that moment, the old monk, Jing Yuan, stepped forward. He took a step forward, and his aura accurately landed between Chu Xiu and Feng Jinwu. A gentle Buddhist light radiated from him, causing the tense atmosphere between the two of them to dissipate quite a bit. With Jing Yuan's current strength, he couldn't even defeat Chu Xiu, let alone Feng Jinwu. However, he was able to accurately use a step and a slight force to break the tit-for-tat battle between the two of them. This old monk's attainments in the martial way weren't weak. There's no need for the two of you to do this. Everything can be discussed, right? Jing Yuan put his palms together and chanted the name of Buddha. Feng Jinwu gave face to his old friend. He did not say anything but stopped the violent gang qi that was spreading out from his body. Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes and asked, "A monk from the Great Light Temple? Previously, I had an agreement with Chief Monk Shudu of your Wangyan Zen Hall that I wouldn't make a move. However, the condition is that no one comes to provoke me. I believe that you've seen the whole story. Don't you know who's right and who's wrong? It's said that monks don't lie. Today, Master, why don't you tell us who's right and who's wrong?" Hearing Chu Xiu's question, Jing Yuan was speechless. To be honest, according to the rules, Chen Jinting was indeed in the wrong. With Chu Xiu's personality, it was already surprising that he did not kill Chen Jinting. Jing Yuan could only sigh and say, "Official Chu, you've misunderstood. I'm not here to threaten Official Chu on behalf of the Great Light Temple. I'm only here as a friend to dissuade you. I don't want things to get out of hand. Now that things have come to this, right and wrong are no longer important. Could it be that we have to create a bloody case just for the sake of arguing?" Huangfu Weiming, who was at the side, also said, "Master Jing Yuan is right. Official Chu, one should be lenient whenever possible. It's just a small argument from the younger generation. Official Chu, you've already taught him a lesson. Let Senior Feng take him back and teach him another lesson." With the people from the Huangfu clan and the Great Light Temple coming forward to plead for leniency, the atmosphere seemed to ease up a little, but it was even more solemn than before. From this, it could be seen that Feng Jinwu had not lived for so long in vain. At the very least, the connections he had accumulated were terrifyingly strong. He could easily summon people from the Great Light Temple and the Huangfu clan. Chu Xiu stood with his hands behind his back and said faintly, "I don't want things to get out of hand, so I didn't kill Chen Jinting to vent my anger. You can take him away today." Jing Yuan and Huangfu Weiming heaved a sigh of relief. Even Feng Jinwu's tightly knitted eyebrows relaxed a little. It seemed that Chu Xiu was still sensible and wasn't the kind of person who would be stubborn to the end. However, at this moment, Ren Chenli lowered his head. He knew that Chu Xiu wouldn't agree so easily. "Sure enough," Chu Xiu then said, "I can let him go, but you have to give me something in exchange for it. Take it as compensation for Chen Jinting's damage to my reputation. I heard that the great soul-searching hand of extinguishing sky and extinguishing earth, one of the great compassionate poems, is in the hands of Elder Feng. Since you don't like demonic techniques, you can give it to me to cultivate." Feng Jinwu's face immediately turned black when he heard this. He said coldly, "What if I don't want to give it to you?" To be honest, the great compassionate poems didn't have much of an effect on Feng Jinwu. The techniques that he cultivated were inclined towards the Buddhist lineage. Therefore, he had a natural rejection towards demonic techniques. He didn't cultivate them himself and even forbade his disciples from cultivating them. Under normal circumstances, it wouldn't be a big deal for him to take out this technique. However, if he were to take out this technique to trade with Chu Xiu now, he would feel like he was lowering his head. This was something that the prideful Feng Jinwu would never allow. If you don't give it to me, then leave your disciple's life here. Chu Xiu took a step forward, and the aura around him soared into the sky. The demonic aura and murderous intent were one, and it actually stirred up the gloomy sky in mid-air. The demonic aura was abnormally terrifying. In terms of his aura and control of the power of heaven and earth, Chu Xiu was actually inferior to Feng Jinwu. After all, Feng Jinwu was an expert in the true fire spirit refinement realm. However, Chu Xiu had the heaven sun gazing at air technique. With the help of the heaven sun gazing at air technique, the demonic aura found the loophole in Feng Jinwu's aura and finally messed it up. Below, Jing Yuan's face revealed a trace of astonishment. This Chu Xiu was indeed someone who could fight with Chief Shudu. At such a young age, he already had such high attainments in martial arts comprehension. It was really terrifying. Jing Yuan didn't know that Chu Xiu had the heaven sun gazing at air technique. He thought that Chu Xiu had purely relied on his profound attainments in martial arts to achieve this. It was just like how he had broken the confrontation between Chu Xiu and Feng Jinwu before. He didn't rely on strength, but completely relied on his own martial arts comprehension and experience. However, Jing Yuan then reacted and hurriedly said, "Brother Feng, calm down. This is Yanjing City." Feng Jinwu took a deep breath and withdrew his aura. To be honest, if this was not Yanjing City, he was really prepared to fight. The moment he released his aura, he had already felt several auras around Yanjing City staring at him and guarding against him. These were all experts from the Northern Yan Imperial Court. It was precisely because Feng Jinwu had not had any conflicts with the Northern Yan Imperial Court that these experts from the Northern Yan Imperial Court allowed him to act so presumptuously in Yanjing City. Otherwise, he wouldn't even have the chance to enter the city. Huangfu Weiming also whispered to Feng Jinwu, "Senior Feng, Chu Xiu's current identity is special. After all, this is Yanjing City. It is not appropriate for you to fight here. Moreover, this person is extremely crazy. If you force him into a corner, I reckon that you won't be able to get your disciple back. Pang Hu and Mei Qinglian are not here. Once they make a move, they will immediately take Chen Jinting's life." Feng Jinwu was silent. After a while he said coldly, "Where is my disciple?" Although he had a bad temper, it was not to the extent of being crazy. If he fought in Yanjing City, it was hard to guarantee that the experts from the Northern Yan Imperial Court would not intervene. Moreover, Huangfu Weiming was right. No matter how angry he was, he still had to care about Chen Jinting's life. In fact, Feng Jinwu really cared about this disciple of his. In the eyes of Chu Xiu and the others, Feng Jinwu seemed to have misjudged people and actually accepted a guy like Chen Jinting as a disciple. In fact, when Feng Jinwu accepted Chen Jinting as a disciple, he was not like this. Chen Jinting's background was very similar to Feng Jinwu's. They were both rogue cultivators, but he had great ambitions and struggled endlessly. Even when he was bullied and ridiculed, he still struggled to move forward. When Feng Jinwu saw Chen Jinting, it was as if he saw himself in his younger days. Therefore, he accepted him as a disciple. Even on normal days, he valued Chen Jinting more than Ren Qianli. However, it was a pity that Chen Jinting had become Feng Jinwu's disciple overnight. Such an identity had already surpassed the level that he had dreamt of reaching. Under this huge surprise, he had completely lost himself. He was no longer the Chen Jinting who had strived hard to make a name for himself among the numerous loose cultivators. However, Feng Jinwu did not know about these things. He thought that his disciple had never changed. Hand over the item first. Then look at the person. My Zhenwu Hall is here, and everyone is watching. Are you afraid that I will deceive you? Chu Xiu said faintly. Feng Jinwu snorted coldly and directly threw the great soul-searching palm of extinguishing heaven and extinguishing earth to Chu Xiu. Since Feng Jinwu had taken his cultivation method, this enmity was completely formed. Feng Jinwu had never hated someone so much before. Unless Chu Xiu did not leave Yanjing City for the rest of his life, otherwise, he would suffer. Chu Xiu reached out and directly took the Great Compassion Poem in his hand. He knew that this was definitely the authentic Great Compassion Poem before he even looked at it. The reason was very simple. Other things could be imitated, but the peculiar touch of the Great Compassion Poem, which was like human skin, and the words that seemed to be written in blood, could tell Chu Xiao that what he had obtained was authentic. Looking at the Great Compassion poem, Chu Xiao's heart was already filled with ecstasy. The Great Compassion poem, this peerless demonic martial art, was finally collected by Chu Xiao. If it was not at this time, he would want to first look at it and cultivate it. However, if he delayed any longer, he was afraid that he would eat Feng Jinwu's eyes. Therefore, Chu Xiao directly waved his hand and asked Pang Hu and Mei Qinglian to bring Chen Jinting out and directly let him go. Chu Xiao said faintly, "Senior Feng, check carefully. Although this guy dared to scold me, he did not suffer any damage at my place." "Master." "Shut up." Chen Jinting wailed and was about to complain, but he was interrupted by Feng Jinwu. He placed his hand on Chen Jinting's mind and examined him. Whether it was inside or outside of his body, he indeed did not suffer any damage. However, when he looked at Chu Xiao, Chen Jinting's eyes revealed a hint of fear. However, Feng Jinwu did not care. He thought that Chu Xiao had said some harsh words, which caused Chen Jinting to be frightened. Feng Jinwu glanced coldly at Chu Xiao and said coldly, "Don't think that you can be so arrogant just because you have some strength and some backing. Chu Xiao, this time you have taken advantage of me. I will let you go for now. Next time, you won't be so lucky." After saying that, Feng Jinwu immediately left with Chen Jinting. He did not notice that Chu Xiao was moving his mouth behind him. That sentence was, "There will be no next time." Chapter 730. Feng Jinwu's expression was extremely gloomy. Chen Jinting only dared to talk to Feng Jinwu after Ren Qianli sent them out of Yanjing City. "Master." However, just as he said those two words, Feng Jinwu directly slapped him. The slap caused blood to flow out of Chen Jinting's mouth, and a look of disbelief appeared in his eyes. In fact, both Ren Qianli and Chen Jinting had been beaten up when they learned martial arts from Feng Jinwu. Feng Jinwu belonged to the old school of martial arts. Not only was his personality stiff, but he was also the same when teaching his disciples. He often beat and scolded them. Although he was diligent, he was also extremely strict. Therefore, Ran Qianli and Chen Jinting were a little afraid of him. However, Feng Jinwu had never been so ruthless in the past. Looking at Chen Jinting, Feng Jinwu said coldly, "This slap is a lesson. I forgot to teach you before. Trouble comes from the mouth. Trouble comes from the mouth." Feng Jinwu didn't care about the Great Sorrow poem. He only cared that he had lost face in front of a junior, Chu Xiao, and in front of so many people in the Northern Yen martial arts community. At Feng Jinwu's age, he had either seen through the right and wrong of fame and fortune, or he wanted to achieve something before he died. Feng Jinwu didn't have such great ambitions, but he didn't care about fame and fortune anymore. He only cared about his reputation. Therefore, he was so angry this time. He was angry that he had lost face. "Yes, Master. I know I was wrong." Chen Jinting covered his face and didn't dare to say a word. Jing Yuan also comforted him. "Brother Feng, let it go. Jinting is just young. When we were young, we were also very impetuous and didn't consider the consequences. If it weren't for the reminder of our masters, we would have also made this or that mistake." Huang Fu Weiming also advised, "It's all in the past. Senior Feng, it's useless to be angry. I believe that Jinting has learned his lesson and will repent in the future." The two of them took turns to dissuade him, and Feng Jinwu finally calmed down a little. However, he still pointed at Chen Jinting and yelled, "When we get back to Empty Valley, you will stay in seclusion. You are not allowed to step out of Empty Valley until you reach the unity of heaven and man realm." Chen Jinting hurriedly nodded. His face also revealed an expression of reverence. However, no one noticed that there was a trace of strangeness in his eyes. After teaching the disciple a lesson, Feng Jinwu and the other two went back together. Along the way, when some of the cultivators saw Feng Jinwu's group of three, they were curious. Some of them even had strange looks in their eyes. This made Feng Jinwu even angrier. He thought that these people were cursing him in their hearts. In fact, Feng Jinwu really thought too much. This group of people was purely curious about the martial artist in the true fire spirit refinement realm, as well as the conflict between Chu Xiao and this person. Now that Chu Xiao and the others couldn't see him, they could only watch Feng Jinwu. From Feng Jinwu's point of view, He had already lost face by taking the initiative to switch players. This was a typical mentality of not taking advantage of others or suffering losses. However, in the eyes of most people, Feng Jinwu did not lose face. Chen Jinting had scolded Chu Xiu so harshly. With Chu Xiu's character, it would not be an exaggeration to kill him on the spot. In the end, Chen Jinting only extorted a cultivation technique. This was already giving Feng Jinwu a lot of face, but he felt that he had lost face. The group walked for several days. Master Jing Yuan changed directions and prepared to return to the Great Light Temple. Therefore, Huangfu Weiming took the initiative to invite Master Jing Yuan to a vegetarian meal as a farewell. Although Huangfu Weiming was not the family leader of the Huangfu clan, he was also a very slippery person. He did not know Jing Yuan before this, but after this trip, both parties were considered to have gotten to know each other. It was not a bad idea to have a meal before leaving to network and deepen their relationship. Although Master Jing Yuan did not seem to have much lifespan left, it would not be a loss to maintain a close relationship with a martial Dao grandmaster. There were no big cities along the way, so Huangfu Weiming found the largest restaurant in the town and invited Master Jing Yuan to a banquet. He even booked the entire floor of the restaurant, which attracted the attention and dissatisfaction of the other martial artists. However, when they saw that it was the Huangfu clan of Western Yan who was inviting the monk of the Great Light Temple, as well as the Northern Yan martial arts legend Feng Jinwu, the others immediately became cautious. They sat downstairs and did not even dare to speak. These people were existences that they could only look up to, especially Feng Jinwu. After not stepping into the Jianghu for such a long time, many people were very curious about why Feng Jinwu had come out this time. After many inquiries, they finally found out what happened in Yanjing City. They could not help but cast curious gazes at Feng Jinwu and the others. Huangfu Weiming poured a glass of wine for Jing Yuan and Feng Jinwu at the same time and said, "Senior Feng, Master Jing Yuan," the patriarch said before he came. "It is not that he does not want to take action this time, but the current situation is a little too sensitive. The righteous and demonic sects are fighting endlessly. Although Xianglong is old, his ambition has not diminished. After defeating Eastern Qi, he still wants to suppress the Northern Yan martial arts world and leave a peaceful Northern Yan for his son. It can be said that the whole world is in a precarious situation. If you are not careful, you will not even know how you died." Jing Yuan also sighed. These are troubled times. 2 of the first seats of the Temple of Great Light's 3 major meditation halls and 5 of the 6 major martial academies' first seats have gone. It's been many years since we've mobilized such a large force. Therefore, in the land of Northern Yan, it's not that the Temple of Great Light doesn't want to interfere, but we can't. Huangfu Weiming nodded and said, "Therefore in the beginning, the patriarch's intention was for both sides to take a step back. Senior Feng, you can hand over the cultivation method to the Huangfu clan or Master Jing Yuan and be the middleman to exchange for Chen Jinting." However, the patriarch knows Senior Feng's personality, so he did not say anything. He knew that you would definitely come personally. Feng Jinwu snorted coldly and said, "Of course I will come personally. If I don't come personally, how will I know which bold fellow dares to touch my disciple? I will remember this Chu Xiu. I want to see if the Northern Yan Imperial Court and the Hidden Devil lineage can protect him for a lifetime." Jing Yuan and Huangfu Weiming looked at each other and shook their heads helplessly. Feng Jinwu's personality was too stubborn. At his age, he did not care about himself anymore. He could do whatever he wanted. Even if the abbot of the Great Light Temple stood in front of him, he would not be able to make him lower his head, let alone a junior like Chu Xiu. However, the problem is, even if you do not care, you still have to think about your disciple. In the future when you die, this hatred will not disappear, and it will all be borne by your disciple. At this time, Chen Jinting walked up, trembling with fear. He held a plate in his hand, but on it was the rare Northern Yan pine eagle meat. Pine eagle was produced in West Chu, and it would not fall to the ground until it was exhausted. The meat was extremely delicious, and Feng Jinwu loved this dish the most. It was not strange to find pine eagle meat in a big city like Yanjing City, but it was not easy to find it in a small town like this. "Master, please don't be angry. This time I was rash. I swear, after returning to Empty Valley, I will work hard to cultivate. I will not step out of Empty Valley until I reach the unity of heaven and man realm." Seeing Chen Jinting's expression, Feng Jinwu's anger was greatly reduced. He picked up his chopsticks and was about to eat, but his movements suddenly stopped. A subconscious reaction told him not to touch the plate of meat. Intuition was not only accurate for women, but it was even more accurate for those strong martial artists. These martial artists could communicate with the power of heaven and earth, so they had a trace of the power of heaven and earth. Although they did not know divination techniques, at a critical moment, there would always be a moment of sudden inspiration that could save their lives. Of course, this intuition was not accurate every time. If it was a normal time, Feng Jinwu would have put down his chopsticks, but this pine eagle meat was brought up by Chen Jinting. At this time, he was still looking at Feng Jinwu, as if his master would only forgive him if he ate his meat. Feng Jinwu also felt that he was a bit too harsh with his lesson. Seeing Chen Jinting like this, he could not bear it, so he ate a piece of meat. However, he felt that there was something wrong with the taste of the meat. However, Feng Jinwu did not think too much about it. He thought that it was because the chef in this small place was not good enough. Jing Yuan was a monk, so he naturally didn't eat meat. When Huangfu Weiming saw Feng Jinwu pick up his chopsticks first, he also wanted to pick up some pine eagle meat. However, at this moment, Feng Jinwu suddenly dropped his chopsticks and his expression changed. "Senior Feng, what's wrong?" Huangfu Weiming asked curiously. Feng Jinwu abruptly raised his head and looked at Chen Jinting with a puzzled and angry expression on his face. "You poisoned the food?" Why? Jing Yuan and Huangfu Weiming were stunned at the same time. Chen Jinting actually poisoned the food. How was this possible? Not to mention that Feng Jinwu only slapped him. Even if he broke one of his legs, Chen Jinting would not do such a thing. Feng Jinwu was his backer, his future. Poisoning Feng Jinwu was the same as poisoning himself. Moreover, there were very few poisons that could kill a true fire spirit refinement realm martial artist. How did Chen Jinting get his hands on it? Chen Jinting's face was pale as he murmured, "I don't know, I really don't know." At that moment, Chen Jinting didn't know what he was doing at all. It was as if there was a voice in his mind telling him that he had to do it, and he acted according to the voice in a daze. He didn't have the slightest ability to think. "Evil disciple! Why did you do this?" Feng Jinwu roared and slapped Chen Jinting away. This slap directly made him spit out blood, and all the bones in his body were broken. Feng Jinwu really wanted to kill. He did not expect that the disciple he had always loved and taught with all his heart would want to harm him. Of course it's because you are not a good master. Father and son kill each other. Master and disciple kill each other. Teseske, this is a tragedy. I can't bear to look at it. Chapter 731. The moment he saw Chu Xiao, Feng Jinwu understood everything. He was still saying that he would definitely find trouble with Chu Xiao when the opportunity presented itself. Who would have thought that Chu Xiao would be even more ruthless than he was? Chu Xiao had no intention of giving him a chance to return to Empty Valley alive. Feng Jinwu's face was flushed. He forced himself to stand up and said angrily, "What did you do to Golden Court? Did you control him to poison me?" Chu Xiao said lightly, "Your precious disciple has already been crippled by you. Does it matter what I did to him? And I didn't poison you. Do you think I would do something so despicable and shameless? It's just a few small goo worms. Moon-worshipping cult's intestine-severing goo." As soon as he said that, Feng Jinwu, Jing Yuan, and Huangfu Weiming's expressions changed. They knew about moon-worshipping cult's intestine-severing goo. In fact, it was impossible for the intestine-severing goo to kill Feng Jinwu. Although it could kill martial Dao grandmasters, Feng Jinwu was a true fire spirit refinement realm powerhouse. Even if he did not have Chu Xiao's glass golden thread goo, which could suppress the goo worms, he could use his own qi and blood to forcefully expel the goo worms from his body. But now that Chu Xiao was here, would he give him this chance? Several intestine-severing goo had already entered his body, rapidly devouring the qi and blood in his body to strengthen themselves. As they spoke, they had already matured and started to gnaw at Feng Jinwu's meridians. The intense pain was unbearable, worthy of the intestine-severing goo. Huangfu Weiming hurriedly said, "Chu Xiao, what do you mean? The matter has already been resolved, but you're still using such underhanded methods in secret. Do you have any respect for the rules?" Chu Xiao narrowed his eyes and said, "What do I mean? I'm cutting the weeds by the roots. Senior Fong is so prideful, and I've embarrassed him today. There will definitely be endless trouble in the future. Instead of waiting for the future, it's better to find an opportunity to solve this problem now. Everyone looked at Chu Xiao as if they were looking at a lunatic. Are you sure that's how you use the word exterminate? A real pellet state martial artist said to a true fire god refinement realm powerhouse that he wanted to eliminate the root of the problem. Why does this sound like a fantasy? But the problem was that Chu Xiao's current appearance showed that he was ready to go all out. Amit ba! Master Jing Yuan took a step forward and sighed. He put his palms together and said, Official Chu, is there really no room for reconciliation? Master Jing Yuan hadn't expected Chu Xiao to do this. Ruthless, vicious, and decisive. Once enmity was incurred with the other party, it would be a fight to the death. While Feng Jinwu was still thinking of finding trouble with Chu Xiao had already planned to kill him. It had to be said that Feng Jinwu was really old. He was an old man in the pugilistic world, but he had been forced to this extent by the schemes of a junior. Even before the two of them had met, Chu Xiao had already planned to kill him. Master Jing Yuan came from the Great Light Temple. He had followed the monks of the Great Light Temple over the years, and he had also seen the rise and fall of many demonic path powerhouses or some villains in the pugilistic world. Although Chu Xiao was young, he already had the potential to be like these people. In fact, he was even more ruthless than them. It was just that Feng Jinwu was his good friend. With Master Jing Yuan's character, he wouldn't do the kind of thing of running away and watching from the sidelines. Room for reconciliation? Master Jing Yuan, are you kidding me? At this time, you want me to stop? Chu Xiao looked at Master Jing Yuan as if he had seen a ghost. Has this old monk been cultivating behind closed doors for too long, so he has become naive like this? Chu Xiao had spent so much effort to set up the soul control goo, and he had already offended Feng Jinwu. If he didn't kill Feng Jinwu this time, he would definitely face Feng Jinwu's crazy revenge in the future. Now, Master Jing Yuan actually asked him to ease up. It was simply the biggest joke in the world. Great Master Jing Yuan sighed again. Then he suddenly shouted, Brother Feng, don't try to be brave. Run. If Feng Jinwu was at his peak, not to mention that he was no longer young, even if he had declined to the point where he didn't have much life left, Jing Yuan would not worry about him. However, the broken intestine goo had already taken effect. Under the intense pain, there was also the power of the broken intestine goo gnawing at the internal organs. The longer it dragged on, the more dangerous it would be for Feng Jinwu. Therefore, if Feng Jinwu still cared about his face and refused to escape, the consequences would be unpredictable. Jing Yuan was indeed Feng Jinwu's good friend of many years. He knew this old friend very well. Feng Jinwu had indeed planned to fight with Chu Xiao until the end. Even if he had the broken intestine goo, he would kill Chu Xiao first. However, seeing that Jing Yuan still stood up to protect him at this time, Feng Jinwu gritted his teeth and stepped out of the window. His figure had already disappeared from the restaurant. Chu Xiao narrowed his eyes and said, The two of you, I'll leave these two to you. As soon as he finished speaking, Chu Xiao's figure moved, and his speed exploded to the extreme. In the blink of an eye, he also chased after them. Pang Hu chuckled and said, You take the old one. It's easy to deal with. I'll take the young one. As soon as he finished speaking, the red long saber in Pang Hu's hand directly slashed at Huangfu Weiming. To be honest, the one who felt the worst at this moment was Huangfu Weiming. Why was his mouth so cheap? Why did he insist on eating? In the end, he ate something wrong. Huangfu Weiming knew that since Chen Jinting was already under Chu Xiao's control, he would find an opportunity to give the goo to Feng Jinwu sooner or later. However, the problem was that he would already be gone by then. Why bother getting involved in this matter? Master Jing Yuan was fighting for his friend. Huangfu Weiming's friendship with Feng Jinwu, or rather the entire Huangfu clan's friendship with Feng Jinwu, was not that close. When they really started fighting, Huangfu Weiming actually wanted to retreat. However, who would have thought that Chu Xiao would directly make him a target? Pang Hu's saber slashed over. Mei Qinglian snorted and said, The old one is not easy to deal with either. Although the great art of the enchanted girl focused on mental attacks, against an old monk like Jing Yuan, who was nearing the end of his lifespan and had seen through too many things, the effect was undoubtedly greatly reduced. However, it did not matter. This time, their target was only Feng Jinwu. She was only responsible for stopping them here. The real killer was Chu Xiao. All the martial artists in the town were dumbfounded. Chasing was very common in the underworld, but it was not common for a real pellet state martial artist to chase a true fire spirit refinement state martial artist. They had never even heard of it. As a true fire spirit refinement state powerhouse, Feng Jinwu's speed was naturally not slow. However, Chu Xiao also had the inner binding seal of the fast and slow 9-word secrets. He walked horizontally and vertically, and his speed also burst to the extreme. He followed closely behind Feng Jinwu. His mental power condensed into an arrow, and the soul-destroying arrow condensed in Chu Xiao's hand. The powerful mental power burst out. Under the blessing of heaven's sun gazing at air, it locked onto Feng Jinwu and went straight to his mind. Feng Jinwu dodged several times in a row, but he failed to dodge it. He could only use his own power of qi and blood to resist the soul-destroying arrow. But at this time, the broken intestine voodoo was constantly biting in his body. The severe pain had seriously affected the condensation of his aura, and even his mental concentration. Chu Xiao's expression was cold. Since he had made a move today, he was determined to kill Feng Jinwu. If Feng Jinwu didn't die today, there would be endless trouble in the future. After being hit by the soul-destroying arrow several times in a row, even Feng Jinwu was a little overwhelmed. Compared to the severe pain in his body, the pain in his mind made him crazy. However, what made him even more crazy was his current state. He was actually chased by a junior to such a sorry state. It even made him feel a tragic feeling of struggling on the line of life and death. How many years had it been since he felt this way? In fact, after he stepped into the true fire spirit refinement realm, Feng Jinwu rarely took risks with his body. Almost every time he made a move, he would definitely win, because his enemies would usually be crushed. The true fire spirit refinement state martial artists from other major sects could afford to lose, but he couldn't. This time, Feng Jinwu also couldn't afford to lose. If he lost, not only would he lose his life, the reputation of his lineage would also be completely ruined. In a dilemma, Feng Jinwu suddenly turned his head. Light golden aura burst out from his body, affecting the surrounding heaven and earth to form a field, directly enveloping Chu Xiao. In an instant, Chu Xiao found that the air around him seemed to have stagnated. It was uncomfortable like glue. Almost all the power in this world was absorbed into Feng Jinwu's stomach. Chu Xiao sneered and said, "Absorb it. The more power you absorb, the better. Don't you know that the power you absorb can not only strengthen yourself, but also the goo worms in your body?" Feng Jinwu didn't answer Chu Xiao. Instead, he directly made a seal with his hands. In an instant, with Chu Xiao as the center, the surrounding heaven and earth instantly reversed. The surging aura condensed into a huge swastika Buddhist seal, imprisoning Chu Xiao within it. With a loud bang, the swastika Buddhist seal seemed to be ignited. It gave off a boundless scorching light and began to explode. Deep in the center of the swastika Buddhist seal, Chu Xiao's expression also changed slightly as he felt the power around him. In fact, this was the first time that Chu Xiao fought with an expert in the spiritual cultivation realm with true fire. The time with Divine Lord Luo didn't count, because Chu Xiao himself was in a daze and Divine Lord Luo was scared away by him. It was only now that Chu Xiao truly felt and understood the power of the spiritual cultivation realm with true fire. It was a powerful power that belonged to heaven and earth. Even though his opponent was just an old Feng Jinwu who had been infected with the broken intestine goo, which seriously affected his ability, the power was still shocking. In the endless Buddhist aura, Chu Xiao also made a Buddhist seal with his hands. In an instant, the shadow of Vairocana behind him resisted the power amidst the chanting of Buddha's voice. However, he was still forced to retreat step by step. Fighting Buddha with Buddha, in the boundless explosion of the aura, with Chu Xiao as the center, the ground within 1,000 feet under his feet was even ground to a depth of several feet, like a huge pit. Chapter 732. Chu Xiao had to admit that he had underestimated the existence of the true fire spirit refinement state for the first time. It should be said that he had underestimated the existence of the true fire spirit refinement state. Or rather, he had underestimated Feng Jinwu. Although it was rare to become a martial Dao grandmaster as a rogue cultivator in the Jianghu, there were still some. There were even many sect leaders of large sects who were rogue cultivators themselves. After becoming a martial Dao grandmaster, they began to establish their own sects and accept disciples. However, it was extremely rare for a lone cultivator to achieve the true fire spirit refinement state. This state itself represented a kind of pinnacle. Using the fire of inner energy evolved from the true martial core to temper the mind, not only could one achieve the true power of heaven and earth, but the pain involved was also unimaginable. The intestine-severing goo was so terrifying that it made the people of Jianghu pale because of the pain. But now, Feng Jinwu had been poisoned by the intestine-severing goo for such a long time, but he did not even make a sound. It was obvious how strong his endurance was. Perhaps compared to the pain of the fire of inner energy tempering the mind, the pain caused by the intestine-severing goo might not even be comparable to the former. Chu Xiao, you're courting death. Feng Jinwu walked forward step by step. The surrounding power of heaven and earth had been condensed to the extreme by him. His hands were raised, but it was as if he was holding up a mountain. With every step he took, a huge crack appeared on the ground. Although Feng Jinwu did not seem to have any changes on the surface, the intestine-severing goo had already gnawed on his body. The true fire spirit refinement state was not afraid of the intestine-severing goo, but the prerequisite was that there was time to expel it. Otherwise, even a powerhouse from the Great Light Temple who had cultivated the indestructible golden body would not be able to withstand the gnawing of these goo. Therefore, he could not afford to delay any longer. If he did not kill Chu Xiao, he might really die here. Feng Jinwu's martial arts leaned towards the Buddhist lineage, but it was not completely part of the Buddhist lineage. He was not a monk, so naturally, he would not recite Buddhist scriptures. However, the extremely fierce aura of his martial arts was very similar to the martial arts of the Great Light Temple. This move of Feng Jinwu's was called the mountain shifting seal. There was no mountain in his hand, but the shape and intent of the mountain had been condensed. As the seal descended, the whistling wind was like a violent storm. The invisible mountain range blotted out the sky and blocked out the sun, directly sealing off the area of several thousand feet around Chu Xiao. If a martial artist with a weak body was struck by this seal, he would probably be turned into a pile of meat paste on the spot. Chu Xiao's eyes revealed a crazy desire to fight. In fact, there weren't many warriors who could be his opponent at this stage. Apart from the little celestial master Zhang Qingzhen, who else among the newly advanced martial Dao grandmasters was worthy of fighting him? Those mediocre grandmasters of the older generation could not even withstand a single blow. Only people like Su Du, Xiang Wu, or Chu Wuji, who had already stood at the peak of the martial Dao grandmaster realm, could be considered as Chu Xiao's opponents. However, Chu Xiao had not really fought with them so far. Chu Xiao had exchanged a few blows with Su Du, but that was not considered a fight. It could only be considered as a test. However, Chu Xiao had crossed an entire realm to fight someone at the true fire spirit refinement realm head-on. It was a rather crazy thing to do. In fact, it was not unheard of for a martial Dao grandmaster to fight someone at the true fire spirit refinement realm, but it was just rare. Chu Wuji had done something like this before. It was said that he had come to the northern Yen to seek revenge, but he was repelled by a true fire spirit refinement realm cultivator from the northern Yen imperial court. There was also Xiang Wu, who had fought with the true fire spirit refinement realm patriarch of the Huangfu clan. Although he was at a disadvantage, it was not embarrassing. Of course, there was also Chen Qingdi, but Chen Qingdi's strength had always been a mystery in the Jianghu. Some people even said that he was already comparable to a true fire spirit refinement realm cultivator. The others had all suffered at the hands of a true fire spirit refinement realm cultivator. Only Chen Qingdi could make a true fire spirit refinement realm cultivator concede before him. As the mountain shifter seal fell, the immense pressure even caused the ground under Chu Xiao's feet to crack. It was an invisible mountain, but it was as heavy as 1,000 catties. Chu Xiao had already unsheathed the heavenly demon dance in his hand. The blade of the sword bloomed with a ghastly blood-red glow and a sinister demonic aura. As the sword slashed down, it was as if it could split the mountains and split the seas. The surging sword intent tore through everything. One man and one sword, with an indomitable momentum, slashed the huge mountain apart. 7 limits. Seabreaker. The might of the heaven-engulfing earth decimating 7 limits originated from the power of the heavens and the earth. Even though Chu Xiao had yet to reach the true fire spirit refining stage, this slash of his possessed the might to tear apart the heavens and the earth. The violent sound of stellar energy was like a thunderclap. Chu Xiu immediately felt a great force attacking him. Even the heavenly demon dance in his hand let out a strange sound. With a furious roar, the power of the sword finally slashed the mountain shifter seal apart. However, at this moment, Chu Xiu's arms were trembling. Even his heavenly demon dance had started to crack. Suppressing the flush on his face caused by the power vibrating his internal organs, Chu Xiu glanced at the heavenly demon dance in his hand. His expression couldn't help but change slightly. A slight crack had actually appeared on the blade of the heavenly demon dance. One must know that although the heavenly demon dance was not a god weapon, it was an existence between a god weapon and a precious weapon. Although it wasn't a god weapon and didn't have a weapon spirit, it was forged by master weapon refiner Mo Yezi using the heavenly demon order of the Kunlun devil cult. Its sharpness and toughness were even stronger than ordinary god weapons. In the end, a crack had appeared on the heavenly demon dance after this attack. One could imagine how powerful the mountain shifter seal was. On the other hand, when Feng Jinwu saw Chu Xiu take on his attack head-on, or rather, take on the mountain shifter seal, his expression changed slightly. At the same time, his face turned pale. Within his body, the intestine-severing parasite was constantly devouring his qi and blood, causing his already aged body to feel his life force weakening at every moment. Just now, he had forcefully absorbed so much qi of heaven and earth into his body. Just as Chu Xiu had said, he was not only accumulating strength for himself, but also for the intestine-severing goo. This was no different from quenching one's thirst with poison. Feng Jinwu's condition could fool others, but it couldn't fool Chu Xiu, who had the heaven sun gazing at air. He looked at Feng Jinwu and smiled. Elder Feng, you should stop holding on at a time like this. The intestine-severing parasite has already entered your heart. Even if you have the cultivation of the true fire spirit refinement realm, you won't be able to get rid of it. But before that, I can kill you. Feng Jinwu took a step forward, and his face was filled with rage. That rage seemed to have materialized, condensing into the shadow of a glaring Vajra behind him. The flames of rage seemed to be able to pierce through the world. At the same time, Feng Jinwu's entire body glowed with a golden light. That was not just a simple protective layer of righteous qi. The golden light had even sunk into Feng Jinwu's body. Chu Xiu's heaven sun gazing at air could clearly sense that the intestine-severing parasite had been devouring Feng Jinwu's qi, blood, and meridians. However, with the appearance of this golden light, the intestine-severing parasite was unable to devour it. The indestructible golden body. What is the Great Light Temple doing? Feng Jinwu's appearance easily made people think of the Great Light Temple's ultimate body-tempering secret technique, the indestructible golden body. In reality, the indestructible golden body was not a technique. Instead, it was a state that could be achieved by cultivating a body-tempering technique to the extreme and combining it with a Great Light Temple's secret technique. Therefore, as long as a warrior from the Great Light Temple was able to cultivate a body-tempering technique to the extreme, theoretically speaking, they would be able to cultivate the indestructible golden body. However, this secret technique was the Great Light Temple's secret. Even if Feng Jinwu had a good relationship with the Great Light Temple, he should not have been able to obtain the indestructible golden body. However, at that moment, Chu Xiu did not have the time to think so much. Feng Jinwu took a step forward, and the glaring Vajra shadow behind him came crashing down with a demon-subduing pestle in its hand. The immense power was like the collapse of mountains and rivers, and it was extremely majestic. There were already cracks on the heavenly demon dance, but Chu Xiu did not dare to use it anymore. He did not want to completely destroy the weapon that he had used for so many years. Chu Xiu's figure retreated hurriedly, and the soul-destroying arrows were shot out consecutively. His mentality was condensed crazily as if it was free, but it was completely burned by the raging flames on the glaring Vajra. At that moment, Feng Jinwu chanted in Sanskrit. It was not the Great Light Temple's 9 transformation lion roar, but it was a similar martial art. The surrounding heaven and earth seemed to tremble, and it shook Chu Xiu so much that he could not even condense his mentality. Even his qi and blood were unstable, and he had the urge to vomit blood. Taking advantage of this opportunity, the demon-subduing pestle in Feng Jinwu's hand came crashing down, and its power was like the sky was falling. The demon-subduing power of the glaring Vajra was too strong. This was the suppression of the realm, and it forced Chu Xiu to be unable to use demonic techniques. Once he used them, he would be restrained to death. However, since he could not use demonic techniques, he would use Buddhist techniques to fight it head-on. Chu Xiu's fast and slow 9 words formula frantically formed seals. The 9 seals merged into one, and like a roulette, it shone around Chu Xiu's body and blasted out continuously, colliding with Feng Jinwu's glaring vajra. A powerful force seeped out of his body, and Chu Xiu's arms even made a cracking sound. In terms of physical cultivation, even though Chu Xiu had both cultivated the great vajra divine power and the 9 heavens demonic golden body, he was still inferior to Feng Jinwu, who had cultivated the indestructible golden body. Boom! A loud sound was heard, and Chu Xiu's figure was directly blasted into a small hill at the side, and the small hill was directly smashed into pieces. Cough, cough. Chu Xiu coughed as he stood up from a pile of rubble in a sorry state, and there was a trace of blood at the corner of his mouth. It seemed like it had been a long time since he had fought with someone to such a sorry state. The true fire spirit refinement realm was really not easy to kill. Feng Jinwu's body shone with golden Buddhist light, but his eyes were filled with a strong murderous intent, as if he wanted to swallow Chu Xiu alive. With the support of the indestructible golden body, he had indeed seriously injured Chu Xiu, but the intestine-severing parasite in his body had not given up on gnawing at his internal organs. Even if he killed Chu Xiu now and forced out the intestine-severing parasite, his vitality would be greatly damaged, and he who was already old would not live for long. Chapter 733. True Fire. When a spirit refinement cultivator attacked, it was said to be able to shatter mountains. It was extremely terrifying. The other warriors wanted to watch, but they did not dare to get close. They could only watch from afar and listen to the commotion. In fact, Mei Qinglian and the others could even feel the intense movements of the battle in the small town's restaurant. Huangfu Weiming was the first to admit defeat. In fact, he was not admitting defeat. It was just that his relationship with Feng Jinwu was such that there was no point in continuing the fight. However, after seeing Huangfu Weiming admit defeat, Pang Hu still felt that he had not had enough. After Huangfu Weiming admitted defeat, Mei Qinglian also had a result. Jing Yuan would not admit defeat, but he really could not fight anymore. After all, he was old, and his opponent was Mei Qinglian, who was considered an expert in the hidden devil sect. Even if his Buddhist dharma was profound enough to restrain the chaste girl great technique, he could not hold on for long. He did not have enough strength. Seeing that Jing Yuan had stopped, Mei Qinglian did not kill him. She was not Chu Xiu, who dared to kill anyone when he went crazy. Although Jing Yuan was not famous in the Great Light Temple, he was still an eminent monk of the older generation. Their seniority was there. Under unnecessary circumstances, killing Jing Yuan would only cause trouble. There was no benefit. Therefore, after the two of them gave up resisting, Mei Qinglian and Pang Hu looked at each other and immediately chased in the direction of the commotion. Jing Yuan and Huangfu Weiming looked at each other. Their eyes flashed with different emotions. Huangfu Weiming was shocked. He was shocked that Chu Xiu had fought with Feng Jinwu to this extent. Jing Yuan, on the other hand, sighed. In the end, his old friend couldn't escape the fate of a cultivator and died in battle. Although he did not know the situation of the battle, he could feel the intensity of the battle and the faint sense of death. At this time, Chu Xiu was on Feng Jinwu's side. Feng Jinwu's whole body was shining with fierce Gang Qi and Buddhist light. All the power had been condensed in one point, like the moment before a volcano erupted. It was abnormally terrifying and made people tremble. Chu Xiu, I really didn't expect that one day I would be forced to such an extent by a junior like you. Although Feng Jinwu was still surrounded by raging flames, his expression was unusually calm, as if he was narrating something that had nothing to do with him. Feng Jinwu had really come to terms with it. There was no winner in this battle. Both sides would suffer. At this moment, he had already used all his strength. Even if he killed Chu Xiu in the end, he would not be able to live for long. Feng Jinwu had experienced countless battles when he was young, so he was not afraid of death. He had even thought that he would either die of old age in the empty valley, or be hunted down by his old enemies and die in battle. However, he had never expected that his last battle would be against a junior like Chu Xiu. Feng Jinwu valued his own face more than his own life. It was not shameful to die in the hands of other martial artists in the true fire spirit refinement realm, but in the end, He died because of Chu Xiu. This kind of anger had surpassed his hatred. The shadow of glaring Vajra behind Feng Jinwu also underwent some changes under the condensation of his power. In the dazzling golden light, the image of glaring Vajra gradually turned into a Buddha shadow. However, the appearance of the Buddha shadow was very blurry, and it was impossible to tell which Buddha it was. When the Buddha shadow gradually became clear under the illumination of the Buddhist light, what appeared was Feng Jinwu's own appearance. Although Feng Jinwu cultivated Buddhist martial arts, he was not a Buddhist martial artist. Just like Chu Xiu, the Buddha that he understood and the Buddha that the great Guangming temple understood were completely different. Youth was full of ups and downs, and middle age was wasted. Feng Jinwu cultivated from a rogue cultivator to a northern Yen martial arts legend, who could stir up a storm and even be treated with respect by the leaders of the major sections. He did not rely on worshipping Buddha. He himself was the Buddha in his heart. The Buddha shadow that was hundreds of feet tall and covered the sky suddenly fell. There was no sense of holiness, only pressure, boundless pressure, as if the Buddha had descended to the world to suppress everything. This was a move that Feng Jinwu had never used before. It was not because of anything else, but because this move that he had comprehended could easily affect his relationship with the Great Guangming Temple. In the eyes of the Great Guangming Temple, the true meaning of martial arts was an insult to the Buddha. Of course, the Great Guangming Temple would not fall out with Feng Jinwu just because of a technique, but it would definitely affect the relationship between the two parties. However, Feng Jinwu already knew that he did not have long to live. If he did not use this move now, he would not have another chance to use it. He was a person who was about to die, so why would he care about their relationship? The boundless Buddha shadow came crashing down, and everyone within a radius of a few miles could feel the powerful force. Some martial artists were shocked. Was this the power of the true fire spirit refinement realm? It was like a deity or a Buddha. There were even some ignorant commoners who had never been educated who immediately knelt on the ground, thinking that a deity or a Buddha had really appeared. Looking at the Buddha shadow in the distance, Jing Yuan chanted the name of Buddha and sighed at the same time. This old friend of his was probably going to appear in front of him soon. Meanwhile, the expressions of Mei Qinglian and Pang Hu, who were rushing in the direction of Chu Xiu, changed. Chu Xiu had probably gone too far this time, and he was really angry. Feng Jinwu, this old fellow, had not really made a move for more than a decade. He was already old, and he was even poisoned by the intestine-severing goo, but he was still so fierce. Chu Xiu did not expect this, and even Mei Qinglian did not expect it. She had thought that this matter was completely under Chu Xiu's control. Meanwhile, in the square, looking at the descending Buddha shadow that covered the sky, Chu Xiu could only sigh. Feng Jinwu's power had indeed exceeded his expectations, but things were still under control. Feng Jinwu had a trump card, but did he not have one? However, Chu Xiu had planned to study it thoroughly before using it, but now he was forced to use it in advance. Facing the descending Buddha shadow, boundless demonic aura gathered around Chu Xiu. The powerful demonic aura even dyed Chu Xiu's eyes black, causing the qi and blood in his body to boil. Together with his powerful mental strength, they all surged into his hands. Under the demonic aura, a ferocious-looking giant bow, surrounded by boundless black aura, was condensed. As the bow was knocked, two giant demonic aura hands condensed behind Chu Xiu. One held the bow, while the other three held the bowstring. As the bow was pulled to a full moon, a terrifying aura condensed in the demonic bow. Even Feng Jinwu, who no longer feared death, felt his heart tremble. The pitch-black demonic aura condensed in the demonic bow to form an arrow, but the arrow was extremely unstable, as if it was about to collapse. Seeing that the Buddha shadow was about to descend, Chu Xiu suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood essence, which merged with the boundless demonic aura, forming an evil arrow that shone with demonic aura and a scarlet color. The bow was pulled to a full moon, and the arrow burst forth. A deafening whistling sound rang out. Even the warriors who were more than 10 miles away could hear it. Everywhere the arrow passed, everything was destroyed, and everything was minced to pieces, leaving behind a deathly silent empty space. When the arrow hit the Buddha shadow, a pitch-black spot immediately appeared on the forehead of the Buddha shadow, which had just carried a shocking power. In the next moment, the pitch-black spot had already begun to spread, and the aura of destruction began to spread. In an instant, the golden Buddha shadow, which was still shining with Buddhist light, was now covered in black cracks. Finally, with a loud bang, It was completely extinguished. One arrow to destroy Buddha. In the past, the gods worshipped by the foreign sects used this arrow to penetrate Sonlian city, and the cult master Duga Weiwei used this arrow to destroy the world's top sect, Iron Emperor Castle. Now, Chu Xiu used the real pellet realm to fight against the true fire-refined spirit, and one arrow to destroy Buddha. Countless warriors in the distance looked at this scene dumbfounded. The powerful Buddha shadow that Feng Jinwu used before had already made him exclaim in his heart. The powerhouse of the true fire-refined spirit realm was like a Buddha, but in the next moment, they saw the terrifying scene of the arrow completely destroying the Buddha shadow. At this time in the field, the demonic aura around Chu Xiu dissipated, and his face was frighteningly pale. In fact, if it wasn't a critical moment, Chu Xiu didn't want to use the Triple City extinguishing arrow. When facing Divine Lord Luo in the past, Chu Xiu once used a very authentic starting move in a blurred state, so he could barely use it, but it was not complete. But this Triple City extinguishing arrow, it was really the first time that Chu Xiu used it. He had pondered this arrow for a long time, and even he himself wasn't sure if he could use this arrow. If it weren't for Chu Xiu using his own blood essence as a guide to successfully condense the arrow, he would even be devoured by this arrow. At this time, standing opposite Chu Xiu, Feng Jinwu's face was also extremely pale. He looked at Chu Xiu and wanted to say something, but he couldn't say a word. Finally, his breath dissipated instantly, and he fell to the ground. The Buddha shadow just now was formed by his power and essence, and it was connected to his primordial spirit. Chu Xiu destroyed the Buddha shadow with the Triple City extinguishing arrow, and the destructive power carried by this arrow also entered Feng Jinwu's body, completely destroying the vitality in his body. A real pellet state martial artist killing a real fire spirit refinement state martial artist. This kind of record may have happened before, but in the past 100 years, only Chu Xiu could do this. It was just that at this time, Chu Xiu had no time to think about other things. The Triple City extinguishing arrow drained all the power and true qi in Chu Xiu's body, along with his blood essence. It was not an exaggeration to say that Chu Xiu's vitality was greatly damaged. At this time, Mei Qinglian and Pang Hu also rushed over. Seeing Jin Wu's body on the ground, both of their faces showed a shocked look. Chu Xiu actually succeeded in killing Feng Jinwu. But before they asked anything, Chu Xiu waved his hand and said, "Take me back to Jinwu Hall first." The two also saw that Chu Xiu's state was a little off, so they immediately took him away. Not long after they left, Jing Yuan, Huangfu Wei Ming, and some other onlookers also arrived. The horror in everyone's eyes couldn't be concealed. Master Jing Yuan sighed, walked forward, and closed Feng Jinwu's eyes that were still open. He sat beside him and began to chant Buddhist scriptures. "My old friend is still ahead of me." Chapter 734. Recently, a storm was brewing in the Jianghu. The righteous sects and the evil sects were in a constant state of chaos. However, the news of Chu Xiu killing Feng Jinwu was like a bomb. Everyone was so shocked that they did not know what to say. Feng Jinwu was an expert in the true fire spirit refinement state, an existence that stood at the peak of the Jianghu. However, he died in the hands of a junior like Chu Xiu. It should be known that the friction between the righteous sects and the evil sects had intensified. Both sides were engaged in a chaotic battle. More than one martial Dao master had fallen, but it was not to the point where a true fire spirit refinement state expert was injured. Now, Chu Xiu had killed an expert in the true fire spirit refinement state before the moon-worshipping church. Furthermore, Feng Jinwu was not a nameless person. He was a well-known figure in the Jianghu of the northern Yan kingdom. In the past, he had also traversed the Jianghu. Even in West Chu and Eastern Qi, he had a certain reputation. At the very least, the elders in these two places all remembered him. In the end, he had died at the hands of a junior like Chu Xiu. Of course, there were also many people who scolded Chu Xiu for being despicable and shameless. He had used a curse to weaken Feng Jinwu's strength. Otherwise, he would have been the one dead. However, in the Jianghu, the winner took all. Chu Xiu was alive and Feng Jinwu was dead. It was as simple as that. There was no point in using the curse. In other words, if Chu Xiu had been in someone else's place, they would not have been able to withstand a single blow from Feng Jinwu, who had been poisoned by the broken intestine curse. On the second day after Chu Xiu killed Feng Jinwu, the Wind Sweeping Tower's ranking list was updated. Chu Xiu had jumped more than 10 places, from the 35th place to the 24th place. He was ranked behind Yan Ji of the Wind Cloud Sword Mound. Back then, little celestial master Zhang Qingzhen had entered the ranking list before Chu Xiu. However, now, Chu Xiu had gone further than Zhang Qingzhen. Everyone could foresee that the gap would gradually widen. It was not that Chu Xiu had to be stronger than Zhang Qingzhen. Now that Dragon Tiger Mountain was sealed, Zhang Qingzhen could only cultivate on the mountain, while Chu Xiu could dominate the Jianghu. At this time, Chu Xiu was recovering in the Martial Suppression Hall. After fighting with a true fire spirit refinement state expert, Chu Xiu had not only gained a lot of experience, but he had also been injured. While clashing with Fang Jinwu's inextinguishable golden body, many of Chu Xiu's bones had been shattered, and his internal organs had been injured. Finally, when he used the Triple Destruction City arrow, he used up all of his strength, and then paid the price of a mouthful of essence blood. He suffered a backlash and was in a miserable state. He basically wouldn't be able to recover without a month's rest. However, he wasn't worried because even though killing Fang Jinwu would cause a huge commotion, the impact it would cause would be minimal because no one would stand up for him. This was also the helplessness of the rogue cultivators. Although Fang Jinwu did not want to offend anyone, no one wanted to stand up for him. Chen Jinting had already been crippled by Ren Qianli. Chu Xiu didn't know if he was dead or not, and he didn't specially look for him. However, now that he was accused of killing his teacher, even if Chen Jinting didn't die, he would have to hide his identity for the rest of his life. Ren Qianli was experienced, but in fact, he was slippery. Chu Xiu had killed his master. Ren Qianli wanted to take revenge, but could he do so? In the past, when he was in the Northern Yan Imperial Court, his backer was not the big shots in the Northern Yan Imperial Court, but his master. Now that Fang Jinwu was dead, even his words in the Northern Yan Imperial Court were not as tough as before. In other words, his current status was not as important as Chu Xiu's. Therefore, it didn't matter if Ren Qianli was a coward or if he knew how to adapt to circumstances. In any case, when he wasn't absolutely confident, not to mention finding trouble with Chu Xiu, he would even try his best to avoid being seen by Chu Xiu. As for the Jianghu, no one would seek revenge for Fang Jinwu. Fang Jinwu's relationship with the Huangfu clan's patriarch was not bad, but it was only good. The Huangfu clan's patriarch would not seek trouble with Chu Xiu because of him. It was the same for the Great Guangming Temple. Chu Xiu had an agreement with Xu Du that he would not initiate trouble. To be precise, it was Chen Jinting who first spoke nonsense in Yanjing City, which led to this series of bloody cases. Now that he was dead, the Great Guangming Temple's attention was not on the Northern Yan, so they would not care about it. Therefore, Chu Xiu could recuperate in peace and did not need to worry about other troublesome matters. After recuperating for half a month, Chu Xiu felt that his vitality had recovered a little. Only then did he take out the great soul-searching palm of extinguishing heaven and destroying earth to read it carefully. When he first obtained this technique, Chu Xiu did not even have time to read it carefully before he set out to kill Fang Jinwu. Now that he held the great soul-searching palm in his hand, even with Chu Xiu's composure, he could not help but feel a little excited. A single great soul-searching palm would naturally not make Chu Xiu so excited, but no one had managed to combine the 7 parts of the Great Compassion poem since ancient times. Therefore, Chu Xiu wanted to see what changes would happen after collecting all 7 parts of the Great Compassion poem. The great soul-searching palm of extinguishing heaven and destroying earth was one of the stronger techniques in the Great Compassion poem, but it was not the strongest. It could only be said to be the evilest. The great soul-searching palm was between a primordial spirit secret technique and a normal martial technique. When it was used, it would extract the soul and pull the opponent's spirit and primordial spirit. Weaker warriors would have their primordial spirit pulled out by the great soul-searching palm and die on the spot. It could be said to be unstoppable. Of course, this was only used against weaker warriors. Against stronger warriors, it could only serve as a distraction and would not be able to hurt them. For the current Chu Xiu, it was slightly useless. Perhaps it could be said that it was more useful in group battles. In a one-on-one fight, Chu Xiu felt that his soul-extinguishing arrow was more convenient. After completely imprinting the great soul-searching palm in his heart, Chu Xiu continued to evolve the remaining 6 parts of the Great Compassion poem in his mind. The 7 parts of the Great Compassion poem fused completely in Chu Xiu's mind. At that moment, A strange rhythm reverberated in Chu Xiu's mind. It was like an incantation, like the murmurs of an ancient demon god. Chu Xiu's vision had already sunk into darkness. What he did not know was that his body was involuntarily murmuring those words that sounded like an incantation. The next moment, a boundless blood rain fell from the darkness. Endless ghostly wails came from the sky. The wails made one's heart palpitate, as though they were about to explode. Chu Xiu spat out a mouthful of fresh blood. The blood rain stopped, the ghostly wails dissipated, and light shone again. This feeling was very familiar to Chu Xiu because he had experienced it before. This was the backlash of a cultivation technique. The door to the seclusion chamber was pushed open. Mei Qinglian poked her head in. When she saw Chu Xiu in this state, she asked curiously, "What are you doing here? You're a weirdo to the point of vomiting blood during seclusion." Just now, Chu Xiu did not know that when he involuntarily murmured that spell, everyone in the entire Zhenwu Hall felt their hearts tighten. It was as though some evil and terrifying existence had descended. The feeling was very creepy. Mei Qinglian also felt the throbbing, so she came over to take a look. Chu Xiu waved his hand and said, "It's okay. It's just a backlash of a cultivation technique. I'll be fine after resting for a few more days." She glanced curiously at Chu Xiu. After hearing what he said, Mei Qinglian turned and left. Chu Xiu let out a sigh of relief. Although the expression on his face did not change, he was very satisfied in his heart. What did the backlash of a cultivation technique mean? It meant that the power of this cultivation technique was too strong. It was so strong that he could not control it in his current state. The power of the 7 parts of the Great Compassion poem combined into one was far beyond Chu Xiu's imagination. This cultivation technique was indeed comparable to those legendary peerless and supreme cultivation techniques. When the Great Compassion poem of heaven and earth intersecting in yin and yang was collected, the martial art was called the Great Compassion mantra of heaven and earth intersecting and demon weeping heaven. Among the 7 parts of the Great Compassion poem, there was no mention of this name. However, for some reason, when Chu Xiu completed the 7 parts of the Great Compassion poem, this name automatically appeared in Chu Xiu's mind, as if it was called this name. However, the power of this cultivation technique was too strong. It was so strong that Chu Xiu could not fully use it in his current state. After experiencing the backlash of the cultivation technique, Chu Xiu's own injury was very tragic. Therefore, it took Chu Xiu a few more days to recover from the injury that would normally take more than a month. After more than a month, Chu Xiu walked out of the seclusion chamber. Although it was dangerous to fight with a true fire spirit refinement realm expert, the rewards were also quite great. At Chu Xiu's level, it was possible to improve his strength through hard work, but it was far less effective than improving his strength through life and death battles. Moreover, the strength obtained through life and death battles was the most stable. There was no such thing as superficial strength. However, at the level of a martial Dao master, it was enough to establish a sect and guard a region. They were all big shots. Who wouldn't want to enjoy themselves? Why would they fight to the death with others? Chu Xiu called Mei Qinglian over and asked, "Did Ren Qianli make any movements during this period?" Mei Qinglian replied, "This fellow is very well behaved. He hid in the Northern Guard Army's barracks and refused to come out." "Are you going to kill him too?" "I was just asking casually." "Of course not." Chu Xiu shook his head. After all, Ren Qianli was still the great general of the 5 armies. If Chu Xiu killed him, Xianglong wouldn't sit idly by. Of course, the premise was that Ren Qianli was well behaved and didn't come looking for trouble. Otherwise, Chu Xiu would rather fall out with the Northern Yen court and find a way to kill him. "Oh yes, Taoist Wuyang came over and left with some elixirs and other things," Mei Qinglian suddenly said. "That old thing is afraid." Chu Xiu sneered. Taoist Wuyang was previously unconvinced by Chu Xiu, and even wanted to fight for the authority of the Zhenwu Hall. However, after the news of Chu Xiu killing Feng Jinwu spread, Taoist Wuyang was indeed a little afraid. Although he didn't admit defeat directly, he indirectly expressed his attitude. He didn't expect Chu Xiu to be so ferocious that even a true fire spirit refinement realm expert died in his hands. Of course, Taoist Wuyang was more afraid of Chu Xiu's ruthless methods. He didn't care if Chu Xiu would be crazy enough to use these methods on him after he angered Chu Xiu. Chapter 735. Since Chu Xiu had just killed Feng Jinwu, an expert in the true fire refinement realm, his reputation was now at its peak in northern Yen. For the time being, there was almost no one looking for trouble. Therefore, after giving some instructions, Chu Xiu prepared to go to eastern Qi. His sky demon dance had cracks when he fought with Feng Jinwu. If he used it again, the cracks would get bigger and bigger, and eventually, the sky demon dance would be scrapped. This saber had been with Chu Xiu for a long time. Even ordinary god weapons did not have the attributes that the sky demon dance had with Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu could not bear to let it be scrapped like this. Therefore, Chu Xiu prepared to go to eastern Qi and ask the blacksmith master, Mo Yezi, for help in repairing the sky demon dance. The sky demon dance was originally created by Mo Yezi. Chu Xiu had only added a few ingredients to it. In the current Jianghu, the only person who could restore the sky demon dance was probably Mo Yezi. After giving instructions to the others, Chu Xiu immediately set off for eastern Qi. Outside the Ji State Prefecture of Chonglin County, Chu Xiu felt a little emotional when he came here again. The Ji State Prefecture was the first prefecture he had visited after coming to eastern Qi. It was also here that he had obtained the demonic dance and was also involved in the God Armament Conference, as well as the Prince of Peace, Jiang Wenyuan, and a series of other matters. Now that a few years had passed, the Ji State Prefecture was not as prosperous as it used to be. When Jiang Wenyuan was still around, the Ji Province Prefecture was his fief. His reputation as the King of Peace and Joy was here, and Jiang Wenyuan had also sponsored many rogue cultivators in the Jianghu. Therefore, there were many martial artists who came to the Ji Province Prefecture to make a living. However, with the death of Jiang Wenyuan and the destruction of Prince Annal's residence, the Ji State Prefecture was no longer what it used to be. Chu Xiu did not stay long in the Ji State Prefecture. Instead, he went directly to the Mirror Lake Villa outside the Ji State Prefecture. There were many warriors outside the Mirror Lake Villa. Most of them came to ask Mo Yezi or the Mo family for help in forging weapons. However, it was extremely difficult to ask Mo Yezi to forge a weapon for him. Not only did one have to take out materials that could move Mo Yezi, but one also had to meet Mo Yezi's requirements. Therefore, most of the people in the pugilistic world did not have extravagant hopes of getting Master Mo Yezi's help. Even if they could get a disciple of the Mo clan to forge a few weapons for them, it would be fine. However, some of the Mo clan's famous master refiners were not easy to invite. Therefore, these people were trying to build relationships and put in good words in order to obtain a weapon forged by a Mo clan disciple. At this time, some people saw that Chu Xiu just went to the Mirror Lake Manor in a daze. He didn't even send any visiting cards or gifts. A group of people couldn't help but snicker secretly. Where did this idiot come from? Didn't he ask about the rules? Two disciples of the Mirror Lake Manor stood in front of Chu Xiu and politely asked, "May I ask why young master has come to our Mirror Lake Manor?" "I'm Chu Xiu. I want to see Grand Master Mo Yezi." Most people who answered this kind of question would only say, "Which sect or sect do I belong to, or what's my name?" However, Chu Xiu's answer was very arrogant. He directly said that he was Chu Xiu, as if everyone must know him. Moreover, he didn't say that he wanted to see Grandmaster Mo, but that he wanted to see him. A disciple of the Mo clan who was guarding the door showed a trace of anger on his face. After so long, he had never seen such an arrogant person. However, the other disciple of the Mo clan suddenly reacted and immediately pulled him back. He respectfully said, "So it's official, Chu. Please come in, I will inform the ancestor." Only then did everyone realize that the person in front of them was Chu Xiu of the Yinma clan. The one who had just killed a true fire spirit refinement expert in the northern Yen, Chu Xiu. However, as far as they knew, Chu Xiu should still be in the northern Yen. Why did he suddenly come to eastern Qi? Before the crowd could react, a disciple of the Mo clan walked out and said, "We have an important guest today. The Mirror Lake Manor is not receiving anyone else. Please leave." Hearing this, everyone present cursed Chu Xiu in their hearts. Why did he come to the Mirror Lake Manor instead of staying in the northern Yen? He was delaying their business. Meanwhile, in the Mirror Lake Manor, Mo Yezi was personally entertaining Chu Xiu. Mo Yezi asked someone to serve Chu Xiao a cup of tea and said, "I've heard about what happened to you in the northern Yen. Teske. I didn't expect you to have grown to such an extent. In the past you, Fei Hong, and the others were all outstanding figures among the younger generation. Now, you're in a different world from them." Mo Yezi sighed with emotion. In fact, he had seen Chu Xiao's path. In the past, during the Divine Armament Convention, Chu Xiao was not considered to be at the top even amongst the younger generation. Later, when he rescued Luo Fei Hung, Chu Xiao could already stand shoulder to shoulder with Ying Bailu and the others. But now, even the true fire spirit refinement expert, who stood at the peak of the Jianghu, had fallen at the hands of Chu Xiao. People couldn't help but feel that the world was changing too fast. It should be said that only Chu Xiao was moving too fast. Chu Xiao shook his head and said, "It's okay for others to praise you, but you can't think so yourself. I know my own strength. I was able to kill Feng Jinwu because he was unprepared. My opponent had been poisoned by the intestine-severing goo in advance, so I was able to kill him. However, the process was also full of danger. It took me so much effort to kill an old true fire spirit refinement realm expert. If I'm flattered by others, I'll find a true fire spirit refinement realm expert at his peak to fight. I'll probably die before I know it." Mo Yezi nodded. It was good that Chu Xiao had such a mentality. He was old and had seen many things. There were many martial artists in the Jianghu who rose quickly but fell even faster. Their strength and fame came too suddenly. As a result, they became arrogant and did stupid things. There were countless people who did stupid things. By the way, you didn't come to my Mirror Lake Manor just to see this old man, right? Mo Yezi's friendship with Chu Xiao was not that deep. He treated Luo Fei Hung as his daughter. At this moment, he was so kind to Chu Xiao only because Chu Xiao was Luo Fei Hung's good friend. Now that Chu Xiao came to find him, he didn't believe that Chu Xiao came just to reminisce. Chu Xiao took out the Sky Demon Dance and placed it in front of Mo Yezi and said, "Master Mo, you must remember this Sky Demon Dance. When you fought with Feng Jinwu, this saber was damaged. I just want Master Mo to take a look and see if you can repair it. You can tell me what materials you need and what price you need." Mo Yezi examined the cracks on the Sky Demon Dance and couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. "SK, the strength of your heavenly demon dance is already comparable to a divine weapon, and even stronger than the majority of divine weapons, but in the end, it was cracked by someone empty-handed. An expert in the true fire spirit refinement realm is really terrifying." After carefully examining it, Mo Yezi stroked his beard and said, "You are good friends with Fei Hong. Your Sky Demon Dance was also made by me before, so there is no need to mention the price. However, if you want to repair it, there are some difficulties. One of them is materials. You don't need to take ordinary materials. My Mirror Lake Manor has everything. However, the main body of your Sky Demon Dance is made from the Sky Demon Order of the Kunlun Devil Cult. If you use other materials of a lower grade, I'm afraid the power of the Sky Demon Dance will be affected. Secondly, you should have also discovered that your strength can be considered as an expert even among martial Dao Grand Masters. In terms of weapons, the Heavenly Demon Dance is a bit outdated. You must change it to a divine weapon to be able to exert your strength to the fullest." Chu Xiao frowned and said, "But if you want to nurture the Sky Demon Dance into a divine weapon, it will take too long. If you change to another weapon, not to mention the fact that a divine weapon is hard to find, it might not be as easy to use as the Sky Demon Dance." The Sky Demon Dance originally had the foundation of a divine weapon. It could be said that as long as Chu Xiao carefully nurtured it, it would definitely become a divine weapon in the future. However, the problem was that Chu Xiao's speed was rising too fast. Nurturing a weapon took at least 10 years. It was impossible for him to turn the Sky Demon Dance into a divine weapon in just a few years. Mo Yezi thought about it and said, "That's right. I heard that you once obtained a Hungry Ghost Dao incarnation in the minor mortal realm?" Chu Xiao nodded. Although he hadn't used the Hungry Ghost Dao incarnation many times, once he did, it would definitely be noticed. Moreover, there were many people who saw the Hungry Ghost Dao incarnation in the minor mortal realm. "I have a way to quickly turn your Sky Demon Dance into a divine weapon. That is to use your Hungry Ghost Dao incarnation as a weapon spirit and integrate it into the Sky Demon Dance. A weapon spirit is not only forged and nurtured. Using an external object as a weapon spirit has existed since ancient times. However, it is very rare because there are very few things that can be used as a weapon spirit. Your hungry ghost Dao incarnation soul is suitable, so it depends on whether you are willing to do so. Chu Xiu heard this and immediately said, "Of course I am willing to." He himself hadn't used the hungry ghost Dao incarnation a few times. The power of that thing was not small, but it was also of little value. When facing experts, its power would be greatly reduced. Moreover, using this thing required Chu Xiu's mental strength to control it. There were too many limitations, so turning it into a weapon spirit was not a big deal. At this time, Chu Xiu suddenly thought of something. He took out the hatred saber of the 7 demon sabers from the space secret box and said, "Master Mo, is it enough to integrate this saber into the sky demon dance as a material?" The 7 demon sabers' strength lay in the power of the saber intent to trigger the opponent's emotions and desires. Among them, Chu Xiu had completely grasped the saber intent of the hatred saber. Without the hatred saber, he could still use the saber intent to trigger the hatred. Therefore, whether the hatred saber was present or not did not matter. Mo Yezi picked up the hatred saber and instantly felt a chill run down his spine due to the intense hatred emanating from it. If it wasn't for the fact that he was also a martial Dao master, he would have been directly devoured by it. After observing it for a while, Mo Yezi sighed and said, "Not bad. This saber was refined using the forging methods of the ancient times. It's made of good materials. The hatred in it can also be integrated into your sky demon dance. It's enough to use as a material. It's even a little extravagant." Chapter 736. Mo Yezi had been in seclusion for many years. Under normal circumstances, he would rarely refine artifacts for others. However, this time, Chu Xiu really attracted his interest. Over the years, he had personally refined many precious weapons into divine weapons, and he had also personally refined some precious weapons into divine weapons. However, he had never inserted an artifact spirit into a divine weapon. It wasn't that Mo Yezi didn't know how to do it, but materials that could be used as artifact spirits were too rare. Moreover, no one would do something so extravagant. Of course, Chu Xiu was a weirdo, so he wasn't in the scope of this discussion. After summoning the human puppet, Chu Xiu gave the hatred saber and the human puppet to Mo Yezi. "Right, Grandmaster Mo, how long will it take to repair the heavenly demon dance?" Mo Yezi thought for a moment and said, "If it was a normal repair, then a few days would be enough. However, I need to insert the hungry ghost Dao incarnation into it and upgrade it to a divine weapon. This will take a long time. This is my first time experimenting with this method, so I can't say for sure. Maybe 1 or 2 months, or maybe 3 or 4 months. Don't worry, I'll send someone to inform you after it's done." Chu Xiu nodded and said, "Many thanks, Grandmaster." Chu Xiu had a lot of martial arts. Without the heavenly demon dance, he wouldn't be able to use some saber techniques. However, his other martial arts wouldn't be affected. Just as Chu Xiu was about to leave, a person suddenly barged into the room. The Mo clan's rules were very strict. At the very least, none of Mo Yezi's children dared to barge in when Mo Yezi was receiving guests. Therefore, only Luo Fei Hung dared to act so presumptuously in the Mirror Lake manner. Mo Yezi treated her like his own daughter and pampered her a lot. At the very least, he treated her better than his own son. Luo Fei Hung was dressed in a tight moon-white warrior suit, revealing her graceful figure. There was no trace of makeup on her face, and she was even wearing a white jade crown on her head. With her hair tied up, she looked no different from a man. If one ignored her towering breasts, she could really compete with LV Fengxian to see who was more handsome. Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows. After not seeing each other for a while, Luo Fei Hung's strength seemed to have improved a lot. She had already reached the unity of heaven and man realm, and her aura was not weak either. It was just that she was dressing more and more like a man. She had probably completely let go of herself after leaving the Luo clan. After entering the house, Luo Fei Hung was surprised to see Chu Xiu. Why are you here? I heard that you just killed a true fire spirit refinement realm expert. Shouldn't you be lying dead in the Zhenwu Hall now?" Chu Xiu's face darkened slightly. "What do you mean by lying on the ground? I'm just recuperating." Luo Fei Hung sat beside Chu Xiu as if he was an outsider. She took the tea on the table and drank it in one gulp. It's about the same. Don't care about the details. By the way, I haven't asked you why you are here. Luo Feiheng said, Of course, I'm here to ask foster father to help me forge a batch of weapons. Back in the Luo clan, ever since Mo Yezi rescued Luo Feiheng, he had already recognized Luo Feiheng as his own foster daughter. Luo Feiheng didn't resist. For her, Master Mo Yezi was naturally closer to her than her so-called father and old ancestor. Mo Yezi pointed at her and said, Didn't I say that if you lack any weapons, you can just take them from the arsenal? Why do we need to split so much between us? Luo Feiheng shook her head and said, It's not the same. Relationships are relationships, and rules are rules. Mirror Lake Manor doesn't belong to you alone. I've already brought the materials and handed them over to my brothers. You just need to give the order. Chu Xiao nodded. This was also one of Luo Feiheng's strengths. She could see things clearly. She didn't care about the small things, but she wouldn't overstep the big things. Mo Yezi shook his head and said, You. All right, I'll tell them to do it. You two haven't seen each other for a long time. It's a good time to catch up. I'll get someone to prepare a banquet. After Mo Yezi left, Luo Feiheng directly leaned on the chair and crossed her legs. She stretched her waist in an extremely unladylike manner and said, I say, Chu Xiao, you're a bit too much. Chu Xiao touched his nose and said, What about me? He hadn't seen Luo Feiheng for a long time, but he didn't seem to provoke her. You still have a part of the 9-branch hall. But after such a long time, you didn't care about it and threw it all to me. You actually made the Guanzhong torture room and Zhenwu Hall under your command very lively. The treatment of a biological child and an adopted child is really different. Chu Xiao smiled bitterly and said, Although I was the one who proposed the establishment of the 9-branch hall, it has always been managed by you. It's no different from your own force. However, this is also my negligence. Take this warrant. If there's a critical situation, you can borrow the power of the Guanzhong torture room and Zhenwu Hall. You can even borrow the power of the Yinma clan. Of course, if you want to borrow the power of the Yinma clan, you have to find the right person first. Only Senior Wei Shuya's clan will help me. As for the others, I can't guarantee. As he spoke, Chu Xiao threw a warrant with his mark to Luo Feiheng. Actually, it wasn't that he didn't care about Luo Feiheng, but he believed in Luo Feiheng's ability. In the original plot, Luo Feiheng's starting point was much lower than now, but she was still able to make the Bu Air Palace very lively. Now that Luo Feiheng was in charge of the 9-branch hall, he believed that she would do better. If Chu Xiao interfered at will, it would be easy to ruin things. Luo Feiheng accepted it without hesitation and didn't stand on ceremony. Chu Xiao also had a part of the 9-branch hall. She didn't need to be polite with Chu Xiao. All right, let me ask you something. Do you know what's going on between Lu Fengxian and Yan Fian? How did the two of them get together? Chu Xiao suddenly asked. Previously, Lu Fengxian had been volunteering to help Luo Feiheng deal with some small troubles in the 9-branch hall. Chu Xiao guessed that Luo Feiheng should know something about the situation. Luo Feiheng said in astonishment, Didn't you see it with Brother Lu last time? You didn't ask? Yan Fian was also there last time. It wasn't convenient. Luo Feiheng nodded and picked up a fruit. As he nibbled on it, he said, Actually, it's nothing much. You also know that Lu Fengxian and Yan Fian have known each other for a long time. All right, you guys seem to know each other together. In the end, Brother Lu got the beauty back, but you're still alone. Chu Xiao frowned and knocked on the table, saying, Let's talk about the main topic. Luo Feiheng snorted lightly and said, There's no main topic. It's just that a disciple of the Yu Nu Palace ran into some trouble. Brother Lu went up to save the beauty and helped Yan Fian deal with some matters. The two of them stayed together for a period of time. In the end, they fell in love with each other and were lovey-dovey. It's very natural. Speaking of which, that's one of the 4 great beauties of the martial arts world, Yan Fian. Cloud Sword Fairy, let alone Brother Lu. If I were a man and had a beauty in my arms, I would be moved. Chu Xiao said in a low voice. But don't you feel that there's something wrong with this? You don't understand Yan Fian. In her heart, the interests of the sect are absolutely above everything else. Even Ying Bailu's infatuated pursuit in the past, she kept rejecting him. Why would she be together with Brother Lu now? Luo Feiheng suddenly raised his brows and revealed a mischievous expression, saying, I say, you can't be jealous of Brother Lu, right? What's wrong with Brother Lu? He's not any worse than Ying Bai Lu. Why can't he get a beauty? I heard that you have a devil sex saintess by your side? She's even Guan Xiu's former wife. TSK, my boss's woman. Just thinking about it makes me excited. If I were a man, I wouldn't be able to last until now. Chu Xiu glared at her. When Luo Feiheng got serious, even men couldn't handle it sometimes. At this moment, a commotion suddenly came from outside the Mirror Lake Manor. Hearing one of the voices, Luo Feiheng's expression immediately turned gloomy. Chu Xiu stood up and said, What's wrong? Is it someone you know? F***CK. It's that fly again. Luo Feiheng's expression turned ugly and he spat out a rare vulgar word. Chu Xiu raised his brows and said, You're in trouble. Luo Feiheng nodded with an ugly expression and said, A disgusting fly always pestering me. This time, I came here not only to forge weapons for the 9-branch hole, but also to hide from him. What's going on? Luo Feiheng explained everything to Chu Xiu with an ugly expression. Actually, it was very simple. Someone had taken a fancy to her, Luo Feiheng. That person was Sun Zhongming, a disciple of the 9 great clans Sun Clan. He was a young talent that had risen recently. In just a short year, he had already entered the 13th rank of the Longhu leaderboard. The martial artists of Chu Xiu's generation had already begun to leave the Longhu leaderboard. At least, the top 5 of the Longhu leaderboard could step into the martial Dao Grandmaster realm at any time. Therefore, some of the new talents had also begun to enter the leaderboard. Sun Zhongming was one of the more outstanding ones. The Sun clan of Jiangdong was considered to be above average among the 9 great clans. Although it was not as powerful as the Ying clan of Shongshui, it was much stronger than the Mo clan of Shongyang and the Dong clan of Jialing. The clan also had a true fire spirit refinement realm ancestor. However, compared to the other aristocratic families, the Sun clan of River East was relatively low-key. They only guarded their own territory and rarely sent their clansmen out to explore the world. Unless there was a truly powerful disciple in the clan, such as Sun Zhongming, they would not do so. The Sun clan of Jiangdong's behavior was ridiculed as a dog that guarded its home. However, it was undeniable that the Sun clan of Jiangdong's conservative behavior was extremely stable, to the point that it could even be compared to the Ying clan of Shongshui. For so many years, the Sun clan of Jiangdong had not declined too much. Even when they were at their weakest and had lost a true fire spirit refinement realm expert, they could still find a few martial Dao grandmasters in the clan. Although allowing their clansmen to wander and fight in the Jianghu could quickly produce amazing disciples, the probability of these disciples dying was not lower than the probability of them eventually becoming martial Dao grandmasters. There was no right or wrong in this matter. It only depended on which was more suitable. Chapter 737. In all fairness, the status of this generation of Jiangdong Sun clan was not low. The 13th place on the Longhu leaderboard was already very high. However, it was a pity that he was pursuing Luo Feiheng. This was because Luo Feiheng would not be interested in anyone. Moreover, as Luo Feiheng narrated, Chu Xiu also understood why Luo Feiheng was so angry that he could not help but curse. This was because Sun Zhongming's methods were too despicable. Both of them were pursuing women, but Ying Bailu was called a Casanova, while Sun Zhongming was called a fool. Ying Bailu's pursuit of Yan Fian was unsuccessful. He was rejected many times, but his infatuation did not change. He tried his best to help her, but he did not make others hate him. After Sun Zhongming was rejected by Luo Feiheng, he went too far. Not only did he pester Luo Feiheng endlessly, but he also used the Jiangdong Sun clan's power to suppress the 9-branch hall and force Luo Feiheng to marry him. Such behavior could not be described as despicable. It could even be called despicable. Luo Feiheng gritted his teeth and said, If he makes me angry one day, I will stab him to death with my spear. Of course, Luo Feiheng was just saying that. Although Luo Feiheng had done crazy things before, she was not like Chu Xiu, who did not care about anything when he was crazy. The Jiangdong Sun clan's strength and status were obvious. If she really stabbed Sun Zhongming to death with her spear, the 9-branch hall would collapse in an instant. Chu Xiu heard this and shook his head. TSK, femme fatale. Although Luo Feiheng's appearance was indeed extremely beautiful, and it was the kind of beauty that gave off a heroic air, her usual behavior was not like that of a woman. Look at the publicly recognized beauties of the younger generation in the pugilistic world, such as Yan Fian and the Holy Maiden of the moon-worshipping cult. There were many who admired them, and there were also those who actually pursued them, but there were only those who did not pester them endlessly. Unfortunately, this kind of thing always happened to Luo Feiheng. First there was Xiahou Wujiang, and then there was this Sun Zhongming. Of course, this did not mean that her charm was greater than Yan Fian's or the moon-worshipping sex saintesses. It was just that those two could not be provoked. Whoever dared to pester Yan Fian or the moon-worshipping cult saintess would probably end up in a miserable state. Luo Feiheng glared at Chu Xiao. Who the hell are you talking about? To other women, femme fatale might be a compliment, but to Luo Feiheng, it was nothing good. Chu Xiao waved his hand and said, "Didn't you always say that I don't care about your 9 branches? It just so happens that I can help you solve this problem." Luo Feiheng immediately said, "Hey, I say, don't get carried away. You can kill that Feng Jinwu from the northern Yan, but the Sun clan from Jiangdong is different from Feng Jinwu. Don't be impulsive." Luo Feiheng understood Chu Xiao's personality very well. When this guy went crazy, he really did not care about his family, and was capable of doing all kinds of crazy things. Usually, Chu Xiao appeared to be the calmest, but when he went crazy, he was also the most terrifying. "Don't worry, I'm confident. Do I look like the kind of person who would solve problems by killing people?" With that, Chu Xiao walked out directly, and Luo Feiheng immediately followed behind him. In Luo Feiheng's heart, Chu Xiao was certainly not this kind of person. He was this kind of person from the start. At the entrance of the Mirror Lake Manor, 2 Mo clan's martial artists were blocking several people, not letting them enter. In front was a young man in his 20s, wearing a cloud-embroidered robe. He was handsome, and always had a smile on his face, looking very kind and sunny. It was very different from the previous description by Luo Feiheng of a wretched idiot who would resort to underhanded means to woo someone. At this moment, the 2 Mirror Lake Manor's martial artists were trying to persuade him. "Young master, there is an important guest coming today, so the old ancestor really cannot see anyone else." Sun Zhongming still had a smile on his face and said, "I don't want to see your old ancestor, I just want to see Feihong, I know she is here." "Miss Feihong also does not see guests." Sun Zhongming smiled and said, "You can't see this person, you can't see that person, your Mirror Lake Manor is really arrogant. I want to ask, do you know who I am? Listen to me, don't make me angry, otherwise, even if I kill you here, I will only say sorry to Senior Mo, do you believe me?" The 2 Mo clan's disciples looked at the smiling Sun Zhongming and felt a chill down their spine. Although he had a smile on his face, as if he was joking, they knew that he would really do such a thing. At this moment, Mo Yezi walked out and said lightly, "Young Master Sun, you are a disciple of the River East Sun clan, but you came here to scare the 2 guards of my Mirror Lake Manor. What's the point?" Sun Zhongming smiled and cupped his hands, saying, "Greetings Senior Mo, I was just playing with them, please don't take it to heart. I only want to see Fei Hong. I hope Senior Mo will not stop me." Mo Yezi coldly said, "It's not that I want to stop you, but the premise of a man and a woman's love is that both parties must be willing. Fei Hong is my adopted daughter, and she admits that she is not worthy of the River East Sun clan, so young Master Sun, please leave." Sun Zhongming indifferently waved his hand and said, "If she is not worthy, then so be it. I don't care." Seeing that Mo Yezi still wanted to say something, Sun Zhongming's face carried a trace of a sinister smile and said, "Senior Mo, you have to be reasonable. Luo Feiheng is only your adopted daughter, not your biological daughter. Don't you think you are a little too controlling? Even if Luo Feiheng hid in the Mirror Lake Manor, it would be useless. I did not force my way in, I was only giving face to Feihong and Senior Mo. Senior Mo, don't forget one thing, this is the Mirror Lake Manor, not the Hall of Gods." Hearing this, Mo Yezi's face turned red with anger. This Sun Zhongming dared to threaten him here. Sun Zhongming's meaning was clear. Eastern Qi's Hall of Gods was one of the 7 sects and 8 schools, and it forged weapons for most of the forces in the Jianghu. It had a wide network of connections, and the River East Sun clan could not afford to offend them. Or rather, the River East Sun clan could afford to offend them, but they would not provoke the Hall of Gods for a junior disciple like him. But now, Mo Yezi was no longer the master of the Hall of Gods. Since he had retired, most of his old connections were naturally severed. Moreover, although Mo Yezi was a martial arts grandmaster, everyone in the Jianghu knew that Mo Yezi could not be defeated. He was no match for a stronger oneness of heaven and man. Although Mo Yezi was angry, there was nothing he could do. The world was fickle, and his title as a crafting grandmaster was not enough. When it was time to use someone, even a famous martial arts grandmaster or a sect leader would have to be polite to him. When it was not time to use someone, a junior martial artist like Sun Zhongming could look down on him. This is not the Hall of Gods, but it is also not the river east of the Sun clan. Young man, don't be too arrogant. A voice suddenly came. Sun Zhongming looked at Chu Xiu, who appeared behind Mo Yezi. At this time, Chu Xiu did not display his aura, and he was not the Eastern Qi elite that he was familiar with. Sun Zhongming was about to explode. However, when he saw Luo Feihong behind Chu Xiu, a smile immediately appeared on his face. Feihong, why do you have to avoid me? Do you know how long I have been looking for you? The Wu County is close to the River East. When you were young, I fell in love with you at first sight. If you marry into the Sun clan of the River East, I promise you that you will not be wronged. Sun Zhongming's expression was very affectionate, but when combined with his tone, it was a little disgusting. Chu Xiu and Luo Feihong frowned at the same time, showing a disgusted expression. Chu Xiu sneered and said, "Fell in love at first sight when you were young? How precocious and beastly." Sun Zhongming looked at Chu Xiu with a smile on his face, but his tone was cold. "I am talking with Feihong here. How can any Tom, Dick, or Harry interrupt?" Tom, Dick, or Harry? The corners of Chu Xiu's mouth suddenly curled into a smile. He abruptly raised his head to look at Sun Zhongming. With just a single glance, the expressions of the few guards beside Sun Zhongming at the Unity of Heaven and Man realm changed abruptly as they blocked Sun Zhongming. With just a glance, these experienced martial artists at the Unity of Heaven and Human realm felt a chill all over their bodies. Who was this young man? How could he be so terrifying? One of the guards pulled Sun Zhongming and whispered, "Young master, be careful, this is an expert." Another guard cupped his hands and said cautiously, "May I ask for this young master's name?" "I am Chu Xiu." Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes and said lightly, "Chu Xiu? That Chu Xiu?" The guards of the Sun clan felt a chill in their hearts. How many people in the martial world called Chu Xiu were there? He was so young, but with just a glance, he was already so terrifying. Apart from Chu Xiu, who had just killed a true fire spirit refinement realm expert, was there anyone else? The smile on Sun Zhongming's face, which seemed to be in his control at all times, gradually disappeared, and his eyes flickered with shock. The shadow of a tree, the name of a person. The current Chu Xiu was powerful enough to deter them from acting presumptuously with just his name. After being stunned for a while, Sun Zhongming laughed and said, "So it's Brother Chu. I really have a bad mouth. I hope Brother Chu doesn't take offense." Chu Xiu looked at Sun Zhongming and said indifferently, "What did you call me? Brother Chu? Are you worthy?" On the Longhu leaderboard, Sword King City's Fang Qishao can call me Brother Chu, and Shangshui Yingclan's Bailu can also call me Brother Chu. But what right do you have? Do you think you're worthy of calling me brother? In the face of Chu Xiu's humiliating words, the guards looked nervous, afraid that Sun Zhongming couldn't help but fall out with Chu Xiu. Fortunately, Sun Zhongming was more shrewd than they had imagined. In the face of Chu Xiu's humiliation, he just took a deep breath, squeezed out a smile and said, "Official Chu, please forgive me. I was rash. But Official Chu, everything must be reasonable. My pursuit of Feihong is a matter of love. Are you going to stop me? Of course, if Official Chu says that Luo Feihong is your woman, I will immediately retreat. I dare not fight with Official Chu." Chapter 738. Sun Zhongming had heard that Luo Feihong and Chu Xiu were good friends, but he also understood Luo Feihong's character very well. He believed that Luo Feihong had nothing to do with Chu Xiu. Of course, if Chu Xiu said that he did, then he could only retreat and think of other methods for the time being. However, at this time, Chu Xiu's face revealed a trace of a sinister smile as he said, "Reason? You should know that I, Chu Xiu, have never been reasonable." Sun Zhongming's expression slightly changed as he said, "Official Chu, what do you mean by this?" Chu Xiu spread out his hands and said, "What I mean is, in the future, I'll have to trouble you to get lost." Sun Zhongming's face revealed a trace of anger, but before he could say anything, Chu Xiu coldly said, "There is something that I'm afraid you don't know. I was the one who first proposed the establishment of the 9-branch hall, so it's best that you put away your laughable schemes. I'm not interested in the bull*t internal affairs of your Sun clan, and I'm also not interested in getting involved. However, if you really provoke me, I won't kill you, but I can make it so that you can never be the successor of the Sun clan in this life." Chu Xiu's words were very confusing, and Luo Feiheng felt a bit dizzy listening to it. However, Mo Yezi could also be considered an experienced person, and he understood what Chu Xiu meant. In fact, when Chu Xiu previously heard Luo Feiheng's description, he also thought that Sun Zhongming was a wretched scoundrel who was obsessed with lust. However, no matter how much Luo Feiheng resembled a man, she was still a woman. When she described it, there would always be some personal feelings mixed in, but she neglected some things. A person who was able to make a name for himself in the Jianghu within a short year and was ranked 13th on the Longhu leaderboard, even if he was a scoundrel, he was a scoundrel with ability. In the end, when Chu Xiu saw Sun Zhongming, he deliberately humiliated him, but Sun Zhongming forcefully endured it. Moreover, based on his actions and tone, although he was arrogant, he wasn't a brainless person. In that case, why was he still pestering Luo Feiheng? Excluding the fact that he really wanted Luo Feiheng, there was only one possibility left, and that was the thing behind Luo Feiheng. Now that Luo Feiheng had betrayed the Luo family, there was only one thing left for her: the 9-division hall. Previously, Luo Feiheng had already said that Sun Zhongming was only a direct descendant of the Sun clan and not the successor. A title was very particular. For example, Ying Bailu or Feng Qi Shao, who had been appointed as the successor of a faction, could already represent a portion of the faction's authority with their words and actions. Now, Sun Zhongming was still not the successor. Although he was the most famous among the disciples of River East Sun clan, at least in the hearts of the elders of the Sun clan, he wasn't the only one. At the very least, he wasn't too far ahead of the others. If he married Luo Feiheng, not only would he obtain a powerful wife, but he would also be able to take over the 9-branch hall, which was developing rapidly and was not weak. This was very beneficial for him in his fight for the position of successor. This time, Chu Xiu didn't plan to kill anyone. However, if Sun Zhongming didn't know what was good for him, it wasn't like he hadn't done things that harmed others without benefiting himself. By weakening his strength, the strength of the other disciples of the Sun clan would naturally become stronger. The strength that he had painstakingly built up would definitely collapse. Sun Zhongming looked at Chu Xiu with anger, resentment, and deep fear in his eyes. Chu Xiu's conjecture wasn't completely correct, but it was at least 80% correct. A large part of the reason why he pursued Luo Feiheng was indeed because he was interested in the 9-division hall. He wanted to take over the 9-division hall and make it his own strength. However, another part of the reason was indeed because of Luo Feiheng. Chu Xiu was a utilitarian person and always liked to think in terms of benefits. In fact, when Sun Zhongming said that he had fallen in love with Luo Feiheng at first sight since he was young, he wasn't lying. The Wu Commandery was close to River East. In the past, Luo Feiheng's father had brought her young to the Sun clan as a guest. That was the first time Sun Zhongming had met Luo Feiheng. However, Sun Zhongming had always been in seclusion in the clan. Now that his strength had reached a certain level, he was allowed to roam the Jianghu. Previously, when Xiahou Wujiang was pursuing Luo Feiheng, he even wanted the clan to intervene in this matter and warn the Xiahou clan. However, his request was rejected. At that time, Sun Zhongming's strength was slightly mediocre. He hadn't stood out among the many disciples, so the weight of his words was extremely limited. But now, he finally had a chance to roam the Jianghu and finally had a reputation. When he saw that Luo Feiheng was no longer a disciple of the Luo clan and had the backing of the 9-division hall, he had some other thoughts. Ying Bailu pursued Yan Fian because he wanted her heart. However, Sun Zhongming only wanted Luo Feiheng's person and the 9-division hall behind her. Therefore, he could use even more underhanded methods. He didn't expect to meet Chu Xiu this time. Looking at Sun Zhongming's embarrassed and angry expression, Chu Xiu said indifferently, "What? Was I not clear enough? Or do you really want me to ruin all your plans, or do you want me to kill you?" Chu Xiu's words were calm, but to Sun Zhongming's ears, there was a chill that seeped into his heart. He had no doubt that Chu Xiu would do such a thing. Since Chu Xiu dared to kill a powerhouse in true fire, what else would he not dare to do? At least after killing Feng Jinwu, the entire Jianghu saw one thing: Chu Xiu's boldness. At that moment, a figure suddenly appeared in front of Sun Zhongming and stopped Chu Xiu's terrifying aura. He smiled and said, "My disciple is insensible. Official Chu, please don't take offense. Please don't lower yourself to the level of a junior." The person who appeared in front of Chu Xiu was a middle-aged man who also had the strength of a martial Dao master. Seeing him appear, Sun Zhongming immediately breathed a sigh of relief and hurriedly said, "Fourth uncle." The Sun family of River East was huge, and the factions in the family were also complicated. This fourth uncle, Sun Qili, was on his father's side. He had once helped his father fight for the position of the family leader, so he was truly one of them. Sun Zhongming came out to roam the Jianghu. He was one of the few people in the Sun family who could make a name for himself at a young age in the past decade. The other members of the Sun family did not care about it, but his father could not ignore it. Therefore, he specially sent Sun Qili, who was running the family business outside, to look after it. This time, when Sun Zhongming came to the Mirror Lake Villa, Sun Qili immediately came as soon as he knew. He was not afraid of anything else, but he was afraid that Sun Zhongming would really become enemies with the Mirror Lake Villa on impulse. Although the Sun family could afford to offend Mo Yezi, he was after all a crafting grandmaster, who knew when they would need him, so it was better to be cautious. He also did not expect that he did not become enemies with Mo Yezi, but instead attracted the attention of Chu Xiu, who was even more difficult to deal with. Chu Xiu stared at Sun Qili, and in an instant, a strong pressure came straight at Sun Qili. In an instant, Sun Qili felt as if the Chu Xiu in front of him had turned into the incarnation of a devil. An endless rain of blood fell, and the cries of ghosts and gods descended. The horrifying aura made Sun Qili feel an illusion of suffocation. "Junior? Don't you have to take responsibility for the junior's wrong words? You want me to not lower myself to the junior's level? Fine, I will meet you, how about that?" Sun Qili's expression changed several times. The shadow of a tree, the name of a person. The Jianghu was full of rumors that Chu Xiu was able to kill Feng Jinwu, so his strength was terrifying. However, those who were too far away did not pay much attention to it. It was not until Chu Xiu stood in front of him that Sun Qili realized that this Chu Xiu was even more terrifying than the rumors said. Pointing at the outside of the Mirror Lake Manor, Chu Xiu spat out a single word: "Scram." Sun Qili's face was ashen. He did not say a word, but directly turned around and left with Sun Zhongming. Mo Yezi shook his head helplessly. Although he had long seen through the Jianghu, he could not help but sigh when he saw this scene. It was really good to have strength. He was a grandmaster who could only craft weapons and not fight enemies. Even a junior like Sun Zhongming dared to speak in front of him. If it was Chu Xiu, a single word from his mouth would make Sun Qili scram, not even daring to let out a fart. What was the difference? This was the difference. On the other hand, Luo Feiheng had a strange expression on her face. It was as if she had only met Chu Xiu for the first time. Luo Feiheng had known Chu Xiu for a long time. Back at the God Weapon Conference, they were already familiar with each other before they had even reached the Three-Flower Realm. Because of this, although she knew about Chu Xiu's reputation and strength, she could not see it clearly. It was only at this moment that she understood the status of Chu Xiu in the Jianghu. He was someone who could make the Sun clan of the 9 great clans concede. Chu Xiu turned his head and smiled at Luo Feiheng. The trouble has been solved. Luo Feiheng was stunned for a moment. However, she then snorted softly and said, "What if that fly comes looking for trouble after you leave?" Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes and said, "Then he doesn't take me seriously. When that time comes, I will personally go to the Sun clan of Jiangdong and discuss with them about disciplining their young disciples." At this moment, more than 10 miles away from Mirror Lake Villa, Sun Qili's expression was livid. Although the Sun clan of Jiangdong did not leave Jiangdong, they still had to do business. Sun Qili was smooth and slick in dealing with people. He was also strong, which was why he often wandered outside and had a certain reputation in the Jianghu. But because of the reputation of the Sun clan of Jiangdong, for so many years, no one had ever dared to tell him to scram in front of him. Sun Zhongming also suppressed his anger and said, "This Chu Xiao is so arrogant. Fourth uncle, when has the Sun clan ever suffered such a great humiliation?" Sun Qili snorted coldly and said, "Put away your petty thoughts. Don't involve the Sun clan in everything. It's only you and I who have been humiliated. If you want to drag the entire Sun clan into this, will your second uncle and the others agree? In the future, don't even think about that Luo Fei Hung. Women are everywhere. She won't make a difference. The same goes for the 9-branch hall. If you want to have power, you have to do it yourself. With your current status, there's no need for you to take the risk and become enemies with Chu Xiao. This guy is a lunatic. If we really anger him, we will be the ones to suffer." You're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.